Thank you for tuning in to the Peoplz and Dragons. If you enjoy the content we provide, then subscribe, like, and maybe join in on the action at www.pndrpg.com.
Haven City, an ugly city. Episode 7. Red Horse. Kid Archetype stands in Anarchy's cell in underwear, bracing himself. Archetype X releases his hold on the aura vitae, allowing it to expand and fill the cell, triggering Archetype to immediately mutate into the abomination that the tank has left him as. We see Anarchy 12 orchestrating a team of androids with his mind as they all press buttons and adjust levels. Though a deformed monstrosity, Archetype's mass of tentacles and muscle are shaped and pushed into place by Anarchy's reforming chamber, powered by re-imaging data, the idle aura vitae, and Archetype's energy manipulation. Once formed into his adult self, Archetype then manipulates the aura vitae to lock back around him, keeping him together and in no pain. Adult Archetype X stands naked in the cell, looking at his arms and down at his body. It was terrifying and appeared as if he was made of clay. It would have to do for now. Anarchy pops up on the screen and tells him how ugly he looks. Archetype immediately smacks away the screen. We see Archetype X walking down the neon-lit corridors of Anarchy's base toward a sealed door. Beside it awaits Epony. She looks a bit tense but tries to remain lighthearted about the entire situation. She trusted Archetype. Epony shivers. She's never been in a place so cold and so artificial. She spots Archetype approaching in his true adult form, but fully clothed and masked from head to toe in a slim, smooth, chrome-plated armor designed by Anarchy called the King's Blade. In addition to its enhanced capabilities, it also is acting as a recovery mechanism for his condition. Not entirely impressed with the fancy tech, Epony immediately thinks of several Oceania martial art kicks designed to decimate opponents his exact height, and is already plotting on a rematch. Epony steps in front of him and halts him in place. Epony forces Archetype X to promise that after all this is over, they will touch base about his collusion with Anarchy 12. And how a dragon finds value in such a low vibrational being. She's conflicted. Archetype X assures her that what they are doing is what's best for all life on the planet. For nature. He then shows her a pure bead of life energy in his hand, then places it in hers and closes it. Archetype turns to walk away, but not before Epony pulls him back and questions him about the excessive covering of his face. Archetype X jokingly tells her that he has a cold and Anarchy developed a suit to help him with it. The two begin to laugh for a second, and Archetype takes in this moment. He hasn't laughed in some time, and all that jazz flashes before his eyes. Good times. Archetype stills himself, then turns away and opens the door. Inside we see Anarchy 12, Ivan, Selena, and Psycho sitting at the table. Selena locks eyes with Ebony and flicks her elongated tongue at her, just before the door shuts. Archetype X has a seat at the table and Ivan asks why Ebony doesn't join them. Archetype knows deep down inside that Ebony's purity doesn't belong at this table, and morally she would likely disagree with much of what everything Ivan says, but instead, Archetype ignores him. Anarchy welcomes Archetype X to the table and admires his own creation being donned by the Wanderer King of Raylagar. Tells him he looks good in the suit. Ivan beckons Archetype to get on with it. Archetype closes his eyes and places his hands on the table, triggering a holographic visual of his Libra, and the group begins to plot their next power move. We see the massive mountain of a man and King of Raylagar kneeling over a moonlit lake of Monster Island. Fully possessed by the facilitator, he kneels on both knees and rips his own throat out with both hands before collapsing, dead, into the lake, filling it with his blood. Moments later, the animated corpse of Rhydon rises, still animated by the life force that is the facilitator's essence. A grotesque necklace of neck matter stains his beard and chest. It was now a body that would remain cold should he exit it. We see Tude standing in the cognitive realm, staring off into the void, drinking and contemplating. His thoughts are cold, heinous, and several steps ahead of everything. He can hear Nam and Rezanok arguing wherever they are. It didn't matter where they were, he could always hear them, see them, feel them. Valuable specimens nearing the end of their purpose. One of them more likely before the other, he thinks. We cut to Nam gripping Rez's sweatshirt up in anger over his blind loyalty and sheep-like mentality. Nam Kai slips up and alludes that Tude has taken more from him than Rezanok knows. Rezanok pulls her arms off of him and she doesn't resist. When he looks at her, his expression softens and becomes warm to the touch as he pulls her into his chest. Nam knows it's hard for Rez not to feel how he does, especially after learning that Rezanok is from another galaxy and of a race of superior beings. Nam pushes Rez back a bit and looks into his eyes with hers. She asks Rezanok if he really believes the answer to his past will be discovered once all of the mutations are inside of him, or are you just Tude's superweapon? Be smart, Rez. Rezanok rebuttals. How else am I supposed to find out, Nam? The Gate Center. I have to know. I've been awakened, and I have you to thank for that, don't I? He says sarcastically. This strikes a guilty chord within Nam. But he's right. Nam Kai hugs Rez and kisses him on his lips. She apologizes for that. Rezanok lifts her chin and tells her that she was just doing what he himself is doing right now. He's not sorry for anything. Later that night, we see Rezanok and Nam Kai sleeping in bed. Rezanok is awakened by cold vibes running up his soul and he turns and sees Tude, unmasked, in all black, standing on Nam's side of the bed staring down at her exposed belly. Overcome with a strange paralysis like dream haze, Rezanok could only observe for what felt like spans of entire minutes before finally being able to speak. Rez wipes his eyes. Tude? Nam wakes up and pulls covers over her when she sees Deaf Tude's large eyes piercing through the darkness at her body. Deaf Tude looks slowly at both of them and tells them it's time to get prepared. He then turns and leaves the room. Razanak and Nam look at each other. That was weird. We cut to a cartel drug lord sitting in her glass loft with a bunch of goons watching every doorway. With the press of mere buttons, the lord begins putting hits out on the spouses and children of goons who have failed to impress her in order to send a message to them. She then turns in her chair and faces the window for a beautiful view of the ugly city, the smoldering crater in the center of it. She whistles, and an elderly hostage strung out on serious drugs comes and acts as a footrest for her to kick her feet up on. The room gets unnaturally silent. Behind her chair, and unbeknownst to her, we see both of the doors crash open and a large, buff, Tarasano male in a leather biker-like combat suit bursts in and places his high-end shotgun into the mouth of a guard and blows their head off, sending their brains across the floor. The other goon is startled and confused by the lack of sound in the immediate area as the unknown man flicks a button on his shotgun, making it glow as he clobbers the goon in the midsection, shattering his bones with kinetic force, sending him flying into the bar, shattering all of the bottles. All of the bottles. The crime lord takes a puff of her cigar as all this occurs behind her. No commotion at all, not even a peep. We cut to the stranger marching toward the goon as he fires his pistol, but the man's biker jacket is of a special high-end polymer that makes him impervious to gun wounds. He grabs the goon and headbutts him, sending his Taurusan horns plunging into their skull, and he proceeds to slam them on their neck with ease, killing him dead. The cartel crime lord begins to smell gunpowder, blood, and whiskey, and turns around to see a tall, muscular intruder standing before her in what must have been. The cartel drug lord begins to smell gunpowder, blood, and whiskey, and turns around to see the tall, muscular intruder standing before her in what must have been. The cartel drug lord begins to smell gunpowder, blood, and whiskey, and turns around to see the tall, muscular intruder standing before her in what must have been the most quietest moment of her life. And last, she knew who he was. She opens her mouth to say his name, Death Trigger. As the vibration of sound is born, it comes rolling off of her tongue like thunder and as loud as nuclear bombs, almost instantly causing both of her eardrums to rupture and explode from out of her ear holes. Death Trigger, the bounty hunter, opens up his arms wide and claps his hands together, causing a sonic boom so incredible that the sound waves splatters and disintegrates the Lord's head all over the windows behind her, which then shatter into glass dust. Death Trigger looks at the old lady junkie and proceeds to send a message via the Bulwark app on his phone to the contractor that the job is done and he's coming to collect. We hear reinforcements charging down the halls. Death Trigger cased the entire joint and knows of all the floor plans. He pulls out a high-tech grappling hook and calmly rappels down several floors before crashing through a window, leading him into a laundry chute, that which in one motion he swings into and slides down the chute further before stopping himself with his legs, places a penetration mine on the walls of the chute, and blows himself out of the building's walls and into his Atlas truck parked on the neighboring rooftop, getting away after a quick job headed to Palladia. Jacob stands in the middle of his barracks watching the live news moments after the gate center is destroyed. He turns off the TV and chugs an entire bottle of whiskey. He puts the bottle on the table, then immediately turns and grabs a whole nother bottle, finishing it in 2 long swigs. Fuck. We cut to Marshall and Jacob pacing around Looper Kin at Club Palladia, trying to come up with a plan over the commotion of punks returning from a job. We see Death Trigger walking by, catching a seat at the bar. He brushes shoulders with Jacob and the two lock eyes for a moment. Jacob returns to focus on the matter at hand, and along with Marshall continues to try to convince Looper why it's a good idea to get the Fist of the Endless out of Haven and away from retaliating gangs. Looper was okay with the idea of getting the Fist out of Haven, but where he pumps the brakes is on the part where they hand it over to the Naboo Kings. Marshall Mesa reminds Looper that Naboo has always been allies with Tempest, and that the Nebi people are also the largest consumers of his Tempest-themed camping tools. Looper rolls his eyes. Jacob adds that he will be forming the resistance under Haven and gathering Haven's most notable figures. Marshall Mesa shows Looper the messages between he and Michael Holland via the Bulwark Network. We've kept our distance from being seen with Michael, but he has been working with us and we have support from his Bulwark Network resistance. Jacob slides a note that he wrote to King Makai over to Looper. Jacob explains that if them three can get Naboo to support the Resistance's fight, they should have every chance in the world. Looper pulls up the news on his phone and shows Jacob and Marshall the political stress over leadership in Naboo. Looper shouts, "You want to bring the Fist into this shithole?" Some Kim heads and street doctors look over, perplexed by his question. Looper realizes he's a bit loud and angrily pushes the note away and tells him he's not doing it. Jacob leans forward and from his heart and soul asks Looper to trust him. Looper looks at him. What rolls off of Jacob's lips next would remind Looper of his sense of duty that he once possessed for the Western Ward. For the people. Everything. Looper looks away and looks back at Jacob. Marshall beckons them and informs them that he already told Michael Holland's people to be ready by the transport. They'll have a ship ready to take us to Naboo. Looper points toward a television behind the bar. Headlining news of a group of 5 troopers touring the districts, cleaning up scum and busting up androids. We see 5 supernaturally efficient soldiers leaping around in formation, gunning down a Wrath Chimera. Looper realizes Jacob isn't budging on the plan, and they're sitting ducks with the Fist, and he can't let Marshall go to Naboo alone. So Looper agrees to go to Naboo and forces Jacob to promise that he'll get those troopers on television on his little rebel team. He then assures Jacob that he is not giving the Fist to anyone. Jacob sighs and looks at Marshall Mesa, who shrugs while in his fresh Mesa Mart mascot uniform. Looper heads to the truck and tells him that this big-ass crate is not going to carry itself. All throughout Haven, we see vigilant heroes begin to rise up and help those tormented by the savagery of life of Haven. Though Anarchy's destruction of the Gate Center crushed the spirits of those who had little spirit to lose, it was the shakeup of the criminal networks that inspired the bravest G-types in the city. The Bulwark Network has never been so active. Powerful G-types have risen to attack Haven's heroes in the name of Anarchy 12, but have been getting taken care of with ease by these mysterious soldiers in all white who have been blatantly calling out Anarchy and his peacekeepers. The people began to believe that this perhaps was a retaliation from Tempest's unit, you know, with all the all-white getup. But it wasn't. These people weren't from here, and they moved like clockwork. Seemingly no powers, no mutations, just highly advanced weapons and tactics. Jacob kept his eyes on the street but kept his distance from the troopers. It seemed as though they had a death wish. In the weeks span of the troopers stirring up Haven, Jacob has worked from the shadows underground, forming the largest and most powerful guerrilla resistance Haven has ever come to know. The Haven Guard. Under and within the minds of the 13th District, Jacob has built an army of amazing allies and unto them gave access to his entire weapons collection. Some were a bit too hard to handle, so Jacob, the gunsmith he is, rearranged its parts like an arrangement of flowers. Down to the springs, Jacob Frankensteined every firearm so that they were twice as deadly and even a child could use. With 80 years of warfare under his belt, Jacob trained the entire army, turning the average Havener into a reliable soldier in some capacity. Jacob also made a great ally in the G1 who found Jacob through his business card that he got from Mesa Mart. Jared Parker, the creator, was an old rugged ordinary with long graying hair and beard known for his dark sense of humor. It wasn't the joke about a Psyquadrian's asshole, an Atlas Gate vacuum cleaner, and the victims of the recent Gate massacre that got him to be a lieutenant of Haven Guard, but it was his wisdom and strength. If anyone understood creation, it was Jared, the creator. Being an intellectual genius above the average genius, Jared could build complex objects and even structures flawless in design. He understood how Anarchy's machines worked, and this has benefited the Resistance. The issue was that Anarchy's technology is so advanced that every machine is unique. The Peacemakers were too powerful to destroy and salvage, and thus nothing could be learned of them. Jacob stays in the loop via the Bulwark Network and TV news coverage to observe his units out on missions. He's waiting for the opportune time, but in the meantime watching and observing the troopers as they go about destroying Anarchy's androids and renegade G-types. Much of Jared's creations have made the Haven's Guard a force to be reckoned with. With support from Naboo, they could not only take out Anarchy, but take back Haven as well. Jacob abstains from contacting Marshall and Looper as not to risk the odds of Anarchy discovering them leaving Haven toward Naboo, along with the Fist. His handwritten letter to Makai Funoichi, Naboo's future leader, could decide the fate of Haven City. We cut to Marshall and Looper Kin awaiting the ship Michael Holland of the Bulwark Network supposedly had sent. Nothing has come, and Looper, though enjoying the quiet, is not okay with these circumstances. Something was wrong. Marshall Mesa cycles through the Bulwark Network to see if Michael was active, but he's been offline. Hours go by and Marshall was able to call in a favor. A Toro-san Kimhead, who owns his own freight ship, was able to come through in the clutch. Marshall's personal payload runner in 13th Ward District, born and raised. The ship was a little bigger, louder, and slower than Marshall would have liked, but they needed to leave Haven and they needed to leave now. Besides, Looper didn't mind the nostalgia of good old Western Ward rust. The two hop on board, carrying the Fist with them. They all hear a massive explosion occur in the far distance. They wonder how the Resistance is faring. We cut to the troopers standing on top of 3 dead Wraith Chimeras while looking up at the raining smithereens of an Anarchy dropship that they just blew up. The light from the neon explosions in the sky glows off their helmets. The leader radios into someone and informs him that Anarchy has yet to show up. Many civilians cheer and thank the troopers for cleaning up the city. A middle-aged man runs toward the heroes to greet them when suddenly 3 razor-sharp, laser-edged cybernetic tomahawks whiz by him, decapitating both legs and an arm, sending him plopping to the ground. The troopers ready their rifles and turn toward the threat. The tomahawks circle back around and are caught in hand by the Apache android, Anarchy's most cunning and skilled creation. The 3rd tomahawk is caught by its forearm, wherein it transforms into a deadly, more lethal war axe. Beside him we see hovering in place the pale-looking priest in its black robes with religious symbols dangling from its neck. The the troopers spot and identify Anarchy's peacekeepers and immediately act. This is what they were waiting for. Whoever these people were, they were gloriously trained tacticians. With swift judgment, reflexes, and masterful coordination, the troopers managed to square off with the Apache and priest for longer than anyone ever has. The Apache charges in. However, each trooper proved to be just as fast while suppressing the Apache with impactful rounds. The priest levitates around, providing force fields for the Apache, protecting it from harm while being held at bay. The third trooper reveals himself as he snipes the priest, but the elusive android dips and swoops into the sky. The Apache, while running up a wall, stows away its axis and retrieves its bow and laser arrows and begins rapidly firing them at each soldier, skillfully flanking it. The priest provides openings in the force fields for the laser-tipped bows to fly through and land true. The arrows crumple upon the trooper's resilient armor. The Apache's methods of attack were inferior to the troopers as a unit. 20 minutes and a coordinated barrage of heavy artillery later, the troopers managed to destroy the priest, and shortly after the Apache droid, all with no injury. The civilians begin to cheer and rally around the troopers. Jacob Bastion finally decides to re-emerge with the Haven Guard resistance. Who knows? Maybe the troopers would join their cause when they see the Haven Guard's army. Jacob and Jarrett approach the lead trooper and greet him. Jacob thanks them for their duty to the city and explains to them that their goals are indeed aligned. The leader appears distracted. He cockily laughs at the part about their goals being aligned. The leader ignores Jacob's introduction to an alliance and invites the Haven Guard to help them lure out Anarchy 12. Jacob and Jarrett can tell that they perhaps have an entirely different agenda. Anarchy 12 is not something that they want to lure out at the moment. Suddenly, it begins to rain blue lotus petals formed of energy. They evaporate on contact. Everyone looks around when one of the troopers spots someone. Jacob turns. R-Type X lands softly on one foot. Plumes of plant life emerge from under, and even a large tree begins to grow beside Epony's feet as she too steps on the scene. The entire street surrounding them begins to come to life with overgrowth from Epony's manipulation of nature. R-Type looks around, scanning the streets and all before him in search for Jacob Bastion, or as the city refers to him as, the Demolition Man. R-Type spots him standing among the troopers and calls out his name. He calmly asks for him to hand over the Fist of the Endless. Jacob's eyes furrow. He doesn't know who this stranger was nor how he would know such a thing exists, let alone in his possession. The leader of the troopers interrupts and steps forward and identifies R-Type X as an enemy of Haven, an ally of Anarchy 12, and thus just another Gamma-type threat that needs to be eradicated. Though Jacob didn't disagree, he grabs the trooper's shoulder and tells him to wait as there are civilians around. The trooper pulls away and gives a signal to his squad that they have a new threat to take out. The troopers never miss their shots and know this will be a fast and easy task like all the rest of the G1 threats. Ebony looks at R-Type. He looked calm, and so was she. R-Type tells Ebony to do as they planned as he goes for the fist. Ebony nods and waits for the signal. Flying down the street, we see an armored hover Cadillac with an old elderly man tied to the hood of it with a bomb strapped to his face. The vehicle is filled to the brim with Aurelio gangsters and the notorious Psycho standing up in the back seat, smearing lipstick all over her face from the turbulence. She then tosses the lipstick and retrieves two large black market auto rifles handed to her by her little sister and she begins to unload them into the air, and soon after, the Haven Guard resistance giving the signal Epony and Archetype were waiting for. Under the neon red moonlight, the nightmarish jungle that is Monster Island lives. It has been a physical and psychological prison for Myra, who has been left stranded for nights in a jungle filled with unfathomable and unspeakable beings. We see her sprinting animalistically through the jungle, leaping and flipping until she gets to a high vantage point. In her looted survey-day robes, Myra peers through the canopy of an overgrown tree and sees two separate groups approaching the island. A fleet of pirate ships to the east, and a spaceship approaching slow from the north. Myra adjusts her monocle. She can't fathom why anyone would want to come to this island. Myra sees this as a ticket off. She then fades into a great cloud of rage mist that now begins to engulf the coast. We cut to a tall, lean, red, dreaded pirate peering through his high-tech binoculars. He spots the opposing ship, then looks at the island's coast, now covered in a mist, denser than expected. He pulls away the scope, revealing his charming face. 3 handmaidens begin to crowd him, cling onto his arm, massaging his chest and running their fingers through his dreaded mane. While clenching a treasure piece between his 2 fingers, John Musket Mouth Smith makes a calculated decision to remain unseen and still get him to what he was looking for faster. He has his fleet turn outward to attack the pirates approaching from the north, while he, on his personal ship, the Musket Barrel, goes in solo dolo using the mist for added stealth. Suddenly, John hears shouting outside of his cabin as the door is kicked open, and in comes Cervantes de Agueja, another renowned and borderline mythical pirate barreling in. Curvy and breathtaking, the Ray Ligarian swashbuckler pushes John's hags out of the way and points her pistol into his nose. Cervantes cocks her pistol and threatens to close his book here and now if he plays games. John calmly moves his face away from her gun and promises her that there's enough value on this island to pay off his and her debts. Despite her bougie silk head scarf, Cervantes is a woman of great debts. It's criminal how much she owes to various brothels within Haven, so she often makes pit stops to collect money owed to her, and John owes her a lot. John Musketmouth has wiggled his way out of many debts, but Cervantes was not letting him get away this time, pulling one of his numbers and hijacking him on his own ship. John respected Cervantes. Every pirate did. Hell, they knew what was good for them. But a proponent of that mythical reputation was Cervantes' ability to tamper with the subjectiveness of reality, often appearing overwhelmingly glorious and intimidating at the same time. John had every intention of paying her back if they could get their hands on those special eggs that were made known to the world via information hacks by terrorists. John educates Cervantes of how he intends to pay her back. There's a tree that grows valuable eggs worth their weight in Zarkons. Cervantes' eyebrows raise. Zarkons? John seductively struts around Cervantes and tells her that she can finally pay off her debts so she can leave him the hell alone, unless she wants to hang around and become his fourth. He points at his 3 beautiful maidens who shiver in fear of Cervantes' gaze. To them she appears as an attractive and lovely woman, but just as terrifying. Cervantes pushes John back as he gracefully falls into his chair, and she asks what kind of eggs are worth so much. John replies, apparently the kind that Eve finds the need to have a film company front as a mutology lab on goddamn Monster Island. Cervantes thinks to herself that she wants those eggs, and maybe one for the kid. A young Rhaelagarian girl walks in, sword on back, dressed in royal Rhaelagarian garb, recording herself on a floating cam device. She poses with one of Jon's maidens and takes a selfie. Cervantes has dragged along with her a royal Rhaelagarian client whom she's supposed to be transporting to Haven, but got a little sidetracked. Allie has gotten so caught up in capturing such great livestream footage that she's forgotten how urgent her mission was. Her first order as a Venryusai in training, the bright light of Rhaelagar, Allie, was sent to warn the wandering king of Rhaelagar, Archetype X, that not only has the sitting king Rhydon vanished from the throne, but now a mysterious Rhaelagarian man is claiming to be entitled to the throne and has come for it, and Archetype. But adventures with Cervantes de Agueha, the legendary pirate, has been so wild and fun that her Allie's World livestream has been at an all-time high. Cervantes puts her arm around Allie's braided head and tells her that she'll give her a gamma egg if she remains patient. Allie didn't know what it was, but it sounded cool, and holds her transport to her word. Cervantes looks at Jon and catches him googling at her curves. She pokes Jon with her power saber and demands that she wants at minimum 12 gamma eggs. Jon acknowledges, smiles, and adjusts his hat. We cut to Jon, Cervantes, and Allie trekking through the jungle. Unbeknownst to both of them, the combination of both Jon and Cervantes' natural luck triggers random unfortunate events to occur, forcing Jon and Cervantes to use their sharp wits and intuitiveness to work their way through the forest. Some occasions required a separate skill set. That's when the Venryusai Allie came into the fold. We cut to a large octopoid breath flare beast crumbling upon itself after being diced up into pieces. Allie sheathes her Yggdrasil blade, poses and snaps an awesome selfie covered in blue ooze. Her supernatural swordsmanship, attitude, and unparalleled speed help see through the perils of the island as they make their way to the great egg-bearing tree in the center of Monster Island. Cervantes and Allie begin to develop a natural bond as they share stories with each other. Jon, keeping to himself, is thinking of a way out of this with as many eggs to himself as possible. Meanwhile, further north we see a group of Mistress Scorn's space pirates drop down from their ships and begin trekking toward the tree as well. They look slightly bewildered as they walk into the dense mist. One of the pirates recommends that they helmet up for the filtered air, and all the pirates do so. But it was too late. One of the pirates tackles their ally from behind and begins bashing their head into a jagged rock until their brains are smothered all over the inside of their helmet. The berserking pirate then looks for the closest thing to attack as all of the other pirates, overcome by the rage mist, rip each other apart. A pirate, not entirely affected by the mist, backs up with his rifle drawn and sprays down a rushing berserking friend of his when suddenly Moira's leg wraps around his neck, snaps it, and then drags him into a bush. She takes his gun and makes her way to the coast. We cut to Jon, Musketmouth, Allie, and Cervantes in the middle of a shootout with space pirates. Cervantes and Jon aimlessly fire their pistols over their cover without looking, and every shot lands, taking out someone somehow. Jon Musketmouth carelessly sprints across the line of fire, calm, without a care, as every bullet misses his beautiful coat and red locks. He takes cover right behind a tree, leans around and fires his pistol, blowing the hand off of a charging space pirate, forcing them to drop their rifle. He then kicks them, sending them falling backward into their cronies. Jon calls in a strike as a barrage of explosive cannonballs come flying over the canopy from his fleet and crashing into the immediate area, blowing everyone up. Except him. Except his allies. Call it luck. We see Cervantes slicing and dicing up 3 space pirates at a time. Their guns jam when she moves into close range, giving her the opportunity to open up their stomachs with a clean cross slash. A space pirate hiding behind a tree pulls out a grenade, and just before pulling the pin out, Ali dashes up to him, decapitates his hand, and tosses it into the mouth of a massive, shadowy serpent descending from above, getting ready to attack them both, blowing it to smithereens. Ali then spin kicks the pirate, spins once more, and sends her sword plunging through his armor, piercing his heart. We cut to John Musketmouth, seemingly trying to sneak away, when suddenly the ultra-fast Ali appears in front of him and asks him if they are close to the tree yet. John clears his throat and checks his compass and says, "Yeah, this way, my dear." Cervantes catches up and gives him a look and shoves past him toward the right direction. We cut to a group of pirates walking through the forest sent to investigate John's fleet on the coast when they stumble upon yet another smaller ship anchored off the coast. They begin to make their way to it when suddenly the fierce and draconic Dravko Mas lands in front of them and leaps into both of their faces with both knees, crushing their helmets and sending shards of it smashing into their fractured heads. He then grabs both of them and bashes their heads together, killing them, all while his goons ambush the rest, shooting them down. Dravko has taken a little island vacation and wanted to bring back some souvenirs for his people. Dravko picks up a sack that the pirates were already carrying and discovers several gamma eggs in them. He tells his people to collect a few more, then they're leaving this fucking island. An hour goes by, and Drav sits on the coast waiting for his people to come back with more eggs and is wondering what's taking so long. He hears something sprinting straight toward him, it seems, and he sees the jungle rustling. One of his largest goons comes sprinting and growling toward him in a bloodshot, berserking rage and manages to tackle Dravko Mas to the ground with super strength. The raging goon screams and shouts, trying to kill him, when suddenly it spouts a gout of rage mist and barf onto Drav's face and open mouth. In deep disgust and anger, Drav inhales and spews a plume of acid onto the goon, melting him on contact. Drav then rolls him over and pushes the dissolving carcass to the side. He stands up to his feet, looks around for any more threats, and sees none. He then turns around and notices that his own ship is sailing out to sea. He squints his draconic eyes and sees the old red-headed Moira Dare standing in Survey Day robes, watching him as she sails back to Haven, using the skills that she learned from the pirates. Drav gets ready to curse, but begins choking, starts beating on his chest while still wounded from the big iron's bullet fragmenting, lodged deep in his acid gland. He hawks a glob of acid into the sand, still filled with shrapnel. Drav watches until Moira is no longer visible. He turns back around and looks back at the mainland as he wipes rage vomit from his shoulder. He hears commotion and heads into Monsters Island's jungle to see what it is. Mistress Scorn stands staring out through the Asylum's window, watching the planet. A white ship, 12 times larger, manifests from light speed and appears right beside the Asylum. Doug arrives and tells Mistress Scorn that their galactic guests are finally ready to speak. Mistress Scorn nods and prepares to meet with the Virgin Tears, a major sector of the galactic expanse who determine what planets and structures containing living, intelligent beings are suitable additions to the civil expanse. Mistress Scorn sees the value in this artificial planet brimming with life. Even though it was a result of a criminal's science project, she wanted the accolades that came with colonizing it into their existing system. The Virgin Tears are in charge of this process. She tells Doug that she will meet them shortly and walks off to tend to immediate business. As Mistress Scorn glides down the corridors, she gets a call from Nova, providing an update on his island task. We cut to Nova, the legendary wolf pirate, and his ship hovering over a great tree bearing special glowing gamma eggs. Mistress Scorn's visage appears before him and tells Nova to gather all of the eggs for Skriller to experiment on. Nova nods and sets his gaze on the tree in Monster Island. His sabers ignite with celestial light, and he nosedives off of the ship, followed by several other space pirates. We see Ali, Cervantes, and John Musketmouth walking through the forest, sharing all the stories of when they met legendary pirates. Ali looks up when she sees several pirates free-falling towards the forest. John's treasure piece subtly begins telling him to go into a different direction. Shiro stands on top of a mountain of ruined bayou shanties, glowing within the fog of gamma radiation. No one was around except for a few stray gamma Calidians lurking about. It was impossible to live in the center of the frontier. However, Shiro's genetic code begins to strengthen itself, preventing death by violent radiation poison. He was adaptable. The cocoon was as hard as rock and warm to the touch. He investigates. Something certainly was alive within, something potentially incredibly valuable, he thinks. Naboo could tame the wildest creatures. Whatever it was deep underground for some time. Not sure what kind of creature it could have been. Shiro checks all around with his scout clones to make sure the coast was still clear. A gamma Calidian comes spazzing up the mountain when a javelin of ice comes flying over and through it, impaling the freak dead. Shiro scouts. They were vigilant. Shiro goes to put his ear up to the cocoon to listen to it, and instead gets an earful of howling, frigid wind as he suddenly begins to plummet from the high skies over Alta's mountains. Shiro collides into various rocky ridges, shattering his bones as he tumbles down Alta's mountains for hours, until finally, the real Shiro rolls and crashes into a tree, damn near breaking it. A disoriented and confused Shiro Aoi tries to sustain his consciousness so that all of his clones remain intact. He is full of important information and must get it to the right people, so Shiro holds on and tries to keep it together. Back at the cocoon, we hear childish laughter. Perched on top of the cocoon from within his dimensional bubble, the childish trickster Poke Turner unveils himself and begins to monitor and observe the cocoon himself. Poke's cartoonishly big-ass eyes climb up and down the cocoon in all of it, just wondering if he can use it to cause more chaos. A squad of 5 to 7 vehicles arrive to the scene. Michael Holland gets out of the vehicle, confused and expecting to meet Looper and Marshall to escort them to the transport. Starts to wonder if maybe he has the wrong directions. Instead, they see a massive gamma cocoon and a child with big-ass eyes staring at them. Poke turns to Michael and the Bulwark Network Resistance and begins pointing at them one by one, teleporting them to different regions of Alta Mountains to fall from high altitudes to their death. He teleports Michael Holland to a place worse than death, behind the Sandwich Maven Haven's counter. When Michael Holland lands, a rat jumps out of his cloak and scurries across the floor of the restaurant, sending customers fleeing in disgust. Just when Poke Turner thought he was finally alone to play with his toys, he turns and sees an entire area surrounded with hundreds of civilians, all with glowing rings of light around their heads. Strange, but interesting, he thinks. Saoirse, Sister Word, walks out from a pocket dimension right beside Poke Turner, startling him, but her immediate presence soothes and calms his heart. Sister Word's aura vitae was alleviating and in the wake of her ability, blessed communion of souls, everyone was raptured up into her mental frequency. Never mind the troubled child, Sister Word could feel. Never mind the troubled child. Sister Word could feel seething hate and hostility coming from within the cocoon. Her aura vitae begins to immediately convert its corrupt essence into inverted benevolence, as her energy begins to remove its tainted origins. Poke Turner had full intentions of manipulating the creature, but Sister Word uses her mystic persuasion to talk Poke Turner into leaving without hostility. Poke Turner felt as if being spoken to by his own mother, and he felt overwhelmed with the feeling of wanting to please Saoirse and to not oppose her. So Poke Turner does right by her. He folds his arms and pouts, then vanishes in his bubble that pops loudly. Saoirse places her hand on the cocoon, now glowing gold, as it begins to open. We see Shearse's face light up in awe of a strange being breaking from its shell. The being she will use to break everyone from out of the Creator's fish tank once and for all, even if it means killing the dragon that strayed away from its path. We see the sinister and jagged blood-red ship of the Nagamatos sailing toward Naboo, answering a personal invitation to the wolf trials from an unknown party. We see the sinister and jagged blood-red ship of the Nagamatos sailing towards Naboo, answering a personal invitation to the wolf trials from an unknown party. Maxima waits by her holophone. A mysterious figure projects itself. A mysterious figure projects from it, and the two begin to plot on establishing business influence within Naboo, just as she did with Haven City. The mysterious figure promises Maxima that their connects will meet her in Naboo when she arrives. The hologram flickers away. Maxima arranges to have the yokai, a family of hitmen, meet her at the docks of Naboo in place of her brother Muramusa, whom is elsewhere holding down family business in Haven. Maxima checks off Naboo as just another nation on her list. We cut to Tempest sitting in the mountains outside of the Valkyrie village, watching the sunrise while eating exotic mountain fruits, with the refugee also rescued by the Valkyries. This woman had a peculiar look to her and had a warm glow, with red hair reminding him of his assistant. May she rest in peace. The two have grown closer over a span of his recovery, and so Tempest ends up opening up to her, explaining his world vision. She learns how he views the weak and strong, and why a gate center should exist. The refugee hears his passion and tells him to calm down so the sage's medicine can start working. Tempest is much healthier and on the verge of recovering from his wounds thanks to the Nebi sages. Makai and Vector arrive with a gift for his daughter Amelia, and Makai formally introduces Vector to Tempest. The last time the two briefly met, they were putting Serenity into temporary power. Vector was the glue that held Naboo together and respected Tempest as he was a similar component for Haven. Vector brings with him what he promised to Tempest he could absolutely recover: important records and resources on a backup drive. He hands it to Tempest. With this, Tempest is able to recover what little is left of Gate that was not kept on site. and this was plenty for what he needed to accomplish. Tempest reconnects with standby gate agents stationed in Naboo and Haven, and they begin the groundwork within both nations. Suddenly, Makai and Vector catch wind of terrible news and are told to turn it on. A massive and elaborate rollout of criminal and character assassination attempts in the forms of propaganda and lies have gone into circulation against Makai, completely compromising his chances of a diplomatic taking of the throne. Even if he were to win the trial, the people would likely not vote him in, and he would have to take the throne by force the Rhaelgarian way. Not uncommon, but not the way Makai wanted to win his people over. But surely it was what Amanda V wanted. This had to be her doing. Only she could fabricate and leverage a lie like the snake she was. But Vector adds a good point. This method was uncharacteristic for the likes of Amanda V. It was too thorough. The main point was clear. These egregious lies would justify staging a coup and the killing of Makai. We see Vector calculating theories and solutions in his head. Tempest is appalled by these lies and can't imagine how Makai Funoichi doesn't lose it. Tempest tells them both that he will help sway the public and wake them up from the propaganda, a task that he was faced with when he was dealing with the Advocate back in Haven. In short time, Tempest's Naboo contacts begin spreading his empathic sentiments and heart-touching rhetoric to combat the weaponized lies. His contacts pass around and broadcast political recordings made by Tempest that makes use of his good looks and down-to-earth message. Tempest monitors his attempts and learns that the hearts of the people have been compromised beyond repair. No matter the truth shed upon them, they ignore and denounce Makai and have nothing but good things to say about Amanda V. It was the most bizarre and unnatural phenomena Tempest has ever seen. The colors and shapes of their emotions reflected their hearts, and yet their hearts were impervious to change. And it got worse. Just then, Vector gets word that his family is under attack. In fact, many who have supported Makai and the Panthro tribe are seemingly all under attack by terrorists. Makai tells Tempest to stay in the mountains, where he and Amelia are safe from Naboo retaliation. Makai's kingdom was truly under attack by nefarious forces, and it was a major distraction. The trial of the wolf was a mental challenge, and meant to be taken with a clear mind, or fall into madness. Vector places his hand on Tempest's shoulder and thanks him for helping with sustaining control. A winged Valkyrie arrives with another dose of glowing mountain water for Tempest. Vector signals over to the only one he can depend on for these urgent matters. Several Shiro clones arrive and receive orders and then depart, except for one. The last Shiro informs Vector of everything Shiro has learned from the mysterious visitor, Mistress Scorn, Skriller's Panet device, the strange cocoon, as well as developing information on Makai's opponent, Amanda V. Vector takes it all in and thanks Shiro for his resourcefulness. Makai approaches. Shiro shows his respect to the future king, then departs. Vector withholds this information so not to disturb the peace and mind within Makai, who we see now putting on his ceremonial jewelry and untying the wrap holding together his dreadlocks. Makai's dark chi dragon of roaring purple death energy manifests beside him as he mounts it. He turns to Vector and the two flash their hand signs to each other. The meanings of them inspire them both. Makai tells Vector that he'll meet him on the ceremonial grounds. we see Amanda V sitting at a table drinking whiskey surrounded by the inner generals of her venomous gang. Sitting on her lap, we see a slender, sexy Nebby woman, her eyes piercing into Amanda's cold heart. Nyla whispers sensual hymns into Amanda's ear in a language she made sure no one in the room could understand. However, it left Amanda in a state of a numbing lust. Suddenly, a robotic mole rat scurries up Nyla's leg, startling her as she smacks it away. Amanda V captures the little machination with her swift reflexes and places it on the floor, letting it scurry over to its master, a child spy and one of the best in Haven. This little Haven punk informs her that Maxima has arrived. Amanda gives the signal to let him in. The tall, charming, and seductive Akari Nagamoto enters, followed by the yokai, large muscular assassins in sleek, identical uniforms, all standing in place. Amanda V wasn't expecting a woman. Maxima gets straight to the deal and manipulates Amanda V into making her the head of all of Venomous's financial structures. Amanda couldn't resist Maxima's charm and silver tongue, and Nyla didn't show an ounce of jealousy, but instead was quite impressed at Maxima's tactical diplomacy. It was as if she dominated Amanda's mind throughout the whole ordeal. The two then begin to discuss business from the standpoint that Amanda V will be the sole leader of Naboo pretty soon, without a doubt, and the two seemed incredibly confident in that. Nyla remains wrapped around Amanda's arm, listening close. Psycho Aurelio's vehicle comes zipping across the streets as she sprays wildly at hordes of Haven Guard resistance taking cover behind city debris and vehicles. Her and her family's bullet spray, ripping completely through resistance members. Haven Guard rebels concentrate their gunfire on the zigzagging vehicle, but discover it is heavily armored. But not before Psycho takes many lives as she sprays wildly at her enemies, causing chaos in the streets of death and war. Not part of the plan, she wasn't supposed to kill innocent civilians. Jacob's face is grazed by Psycho's bullets, causing him to dive into cover. The troopers begin unloading on R-Type X and Epony with the barrage of high-powered weaponry, but R-Type X effortlessly smacks away several rounds of bullets with both of his bare hands, and then as it becomes overwhelming, he erects a barrier of blue energy. Epony spins and swivels her hips in one stylish and rhythmic motion, causing the forest around them to grow denser and obscure them. Suddenly, rows of several trees burst from under the streets toward the group of troopers, forcing them to separate. We see Epony darting and zigzagging between them, evading gunfire from each of the troopers. Epony runs up a tree, and with augmented strength from the planet, she performs 2 spinning kicks, sending the trees crashing down toward the troopers, causing them to scatter. Epony crashes down beside a trooper and sends a kick, but her foot is shot by a projectile that binds her leg within a net and sends her flying into a tree. 3 soldiers begin to circle her while firing, but she engulfs her leg in flames, freeing herself, then turns herself into stone as the bullets chip away at her slowly, leaving her unharmed. A trooper lines up his sniper shot, Epony's dome in their scope, but R-Type X appears in the line of sight, and with the flex of his EMP gauntlet on his armor, he sends a burst of electromagnetic energy that causes it to explode in their hands. A clone of R-Type X then appears behind the trooper and flips them over his shoulder by its neck, slamming them into a wall of energy that explodes. We cut to R-Type X and Epony maneuvering in and around the forest, confusing the well-organized troopers and providing quite the challenge. Using deception and clever misdirection, R-Type X and Epony intertwine with devastating punches and kicks, but the troopers were far too experienced. Their perfect aim and formation forces the two to separate and spread out in order to close the distance between them and the skilled shooters. Psycho Aurelio cruises along the edge of the forest and begins tossing grenades into the woods, forcing the resistance to spread apart. Jacob brushes himself off and shouts into the sky, "Hallelujah!" and it echoes through the forest as other resistance members hear this and scream out the same. This was a signal. Psycho stops throwing grenades, perplexed by the odd shouting of the word, when suddenly we see several bulky bullets glowing orange fly across the street, peppering and penetrating the armored Cadillac's side doors and ripping into the bodies of her family. One bullet even lands true into the dome of her grandfather, slumping his head into the driver's lap, causing him to swerve. Psycho looks down at her family in pain, holding their abdomens together, now filled with hot rounds. But not just any rounds. In a matter of moments, the bullets begin to expand and suddenly detonate, causing highly destructive explosions that completely send their family members' guts and entrails flying in every direction within the interior of the Cadillac. Her father's head explodes, obliterating the entire stomach and legs of the driver, as well as the front portion of the vehicle. The back seat erupts with blood, guts, and flames as the vehicle's parts and tires go flying every which way, even sending Psycho flying out of the vehicle and crash landing into a tree. Hallelujah, it's raining gore, or HIRG rounds for short, are a specialty bullet invented by Jacob Bastian in order to deal with more persistent or durable enemies. The bullet was an armor-piercing head designed to pierce through the armor of a heavy tank, and has a special mixture of explosives inside that once the bullet is in, the targets will detonate with the force of a high explosive grenade. Masterpiece. We see Psycho laying on a burning heap of foliage, laughing creepily and quietly to herself while pulling herself up. She sits up and adjusts her Anarchy for President pin on her collar and hears Haven Guard resistance rebels approaching to look for her body. They arrive to a clearing and find nothing there. Suddenly, a rebel begins to feel a rising pain from his toes, now growing into his knee. It felt as if molten lava was crawling up his leg, when in actual reality it was Psycho making the rebel so sensitive that even the tug of gravity itself was agonizing. Psycho flips from out of the shadows and lays into each resistance member with an agile flurry of swift kicks as they stumble around with sabotaged senses. Each strike feeling like death blows. A resistant soldier aims down Psycho with his rifle loaded with HIRG rounds and prepares to take her out, but hesitates. After all, he'd be shooting a little schoolgirl. The Haven Guard resistance were made up of do-gooders, and not all of them were savage. Psycho dive rolls toward him and somersaults onto his chest and grabs his face tight. The pain felt as if his head was in a state of being ripped apart, but it wasn't. Psycho locked the intensity of the pain at its peak point, but not enough to make him faint. The man falls on his back with little Psycho over top of him, slapping his face around, laughing until she hears resistance reinforcements approaching. Psycho puts a pistol to his eye and blows half of his head off, purposely leaving him to die slow. She gets up and stretches. Ebony's forest became a playground for her. A large pillar of energy shoots up from under the two mysterious troopers, disrupting their formation. Once in the air, lightning strikes the trooper in the chest from the sky, and in a blink of an eye we see it was Ebony with her knee lodged deep into their armor, cracking it in half. The other trooper points his gun and fires a shot, but Ebony's shoulder turns into stone and endures the off-balance shot. The trooper looks down and realizes he's being held in place by 3 R-Type X clones as a 4th R-Type appears in front of him, grabs his arm, breaks it in 3 ways, kicks in their knee, breaking their leg, and sends one devastating blow into their gut, causing them to drop their gun. Then sidekicks the disabled trooper off of the pillar, hitting a billboard, then landing onto a car. Ebony's fist turns into volcanic rock as she clobbers the electrocuted trooper over the head twice, breaking his helmet in. He then aims his rifle, but Ebony grabs it, coats it in a thin veil of water, then erodes it with high-pressured air, and within seconds the firearm is turned into a useless slab of weathered metal. Ebony then places an oceanic island spore onto the trooper's exposed chest, then kicks him off of the energy pillar, where he is then swooped up in midair by a large oceanic hawk that soars through the sky and drops the trooper, now engulfed in a cloud of toxic spores like a bomb, into a horde of army resistance members, sending them all into a poison-induced sleep. Jacob, who we see posted up on the side of a building with a grappling hook, fires a round that makes its way past the ears of Ebony and Archetype X intentionally and sends a screeching ultrasonic boom that ruptures their eardrums, causing Archetype X's head to explode, revealing it was just another clone. Ebony's dense hair of a goddess took the brunt of the sonic attack, but still effective nonetheless, sending her stumbling when she's instantly sniped by a trooper, taking an unsuspected bullet to the head, sending her flying off. Ebony is caught by the vines of a massive exotic plant, softening her fall. She gets up as the bullet falls out of her forehead, revealing R-Type's energy shielding. Ebony realizes the troopers and Jacob are expert strategists and gunmen, and are using her nativity of the forest ability to their advantage as well. R-Type lands beside her and tells her to do it. Ebony begins to swivel her hips and spin erotically as wind begins to pick up within the forest. The plant life begins to turn ultraviolet and become hostile to everyone in it except for her and R-Type. The trees begin to release toxic fumes, and large vines begin searching the forest for its prey as they become covered in R-Type's blue energy. Jacob swings across the forest on a grappling hook, unloading a powerful rifle that shreds through all of the trees and begins to pepper Ebony's dancing stone body, when suddenly R-Type X appears on the rope and cuts it with an energy sword, sending them both falling to the ground. While falling, Jacob turns around mid-air, pulling out a mini grenade launcher that he launches at R-Type. But R-Type points his finger like a gun and shoots a beam of energy at the grenade mid-flight, causing a sizable explosion, blowing them both a far distance apart. Jacob's lifeless body, burnt to a crisp, hits a tree like a ragdoll. R-Type comes hovering over Jacob's corpse, his chrome body reflecting the beautiful oceanic plant life around him. Jacob begins coughing. He was alive. He begins crawling on his stomach as his burnt flesh begins to heal itself. R-Type slowly hovers above him, observing and examining him with Libra, armed to the teeth. Seemingly incredible durability with a near-perfect healing factor. Libra scans. R-Type wonders if this is perhaps the result of the Fist of the Endless. He puts his foot on Jacob's back, then picks him up with one arm by his coat. R-Type X demands that Jacob stop resisting and hands over the Fist of the Endless. Jacob, now returned back to perfect condition, coughs up the last bit of blood in his mouth. You're looking quite shiny. Did Anarchy turn you into one of his toys too? Unamused, R-Type continues to scan Jacob using the King's Blade Advanced Vision and discovers Jacob's secret. He spots and reaches into Jacob's many pockets and pulls out a mysterious lodestone. He identifies that it is of strange origin and has traces of life energy within it. R-Type X asks for him to hand over the fist now that he was without his mysterious stone. Jacob surrenders. He reaches slowly into his pocket for what R-Type is asking for. He whispers to R-Type, "For the people, everything," then pulls out the big iron and at point-blank range catches R-Type off guard and puts a bullet directly into R-Type's face. Bang! Everything goes black. We fade into frame and see Jacob still in the grasp of R-Type X, though the grip is significantly loosened. R-Type's head is cocked all the way back as we see the AP Gravis round capable of penetrating Atlas security doors, spinning and spitting dead center of R-Type's forehead and held in place by R-Type's cannon field, a protective layer of kinetic energy designed to absorb and redirect. We watch as all of the impact is absorbed into R-Type's face, traveling down into his fist, causing it to glow with blue radiance. R-Type X cocks back his fist full of energy containing the bullet's power multiplied by 10. R-Type X prepares to cripple Jacob for life when suddenly his wrist is grabbed with great strength. R-Type X, caught off guard, didn't sense any life energy signatures in the area. Archetype turns around, and standing tall before him, he sees the glowing white eyes of a scarred up, big and muscular Rhaelagarian man in an all-black Rhaelagarian war suit with a white sash tied around his waist and a peculiar light green obi sash around that one. Starrift, the son of a Rhaelagarian outcast, and thus born an outcast of the renowned warrior race. Without saying anything, and before Archetype X could even budge, Starrift absorbs the immense energy from within Archetype's fists and channels it into his own energy and sends a world-shattering blow into Archetype's head, destroying all of the teeth on the right side of his jaw, breaking it and causing him to go blind in one eye and deaf in the other ear. The impact was enough to send Archetype X flying. However, he's held in place, wrist locked within Starrift's grip. Starrift then absorbs all of the energy from Archetype's suit, then pulls Archetype into a clothesline that would have beheaded him if it weren't for his energy field, sending Archetype twirling to the ground. Starrift watches Archetype slowly gather himself, slightly crippled and majorly disoriented from the King's Blade suit malfunctioning and going haywire, disrupting his own senses. Starrift's voice rumbles through the hearts of Jacob and Archetype. A king who strays from his kingdom is no king at all. Archetype X manages to get to his knee and looks up at this mysterious and unfamiliar adversary. With no energy signature, Archetype had no idea who this stranger was. We cut to Psycho Aurelio wreaking havoc on the Haven Guard resistance, taking them out one by one with her overwhelming sense manipulation and Suryoku fighting style. We see her holding up a beaten and crippled resistance street doctor in a headlock, threatening to break their flimsy fucking neck if any of their friends make a move. Psycho then moves the rebel's mouth with her hand like a puppet, mocking all of the Haven Guard and their stupid yellow coyote mascot leader. Jacob turns to the lunatic child and is conflicted on how to act. Epony lands beside Archetype X and helps him to his feet. Archetype brushes himself off. It was a great shot, but still child's play to him, as he pulls his shroud down to spit teeth out of his mouth and covers it back up. Suddenly, the rugged old Wardenary Jared the Creator teleports and appears directly behind Psycho. The electricity and space waves emitting from his handcrafted dynamic sphere telebelt comes in loud and abrupt. Before Psycho could react, Jared points a strange gadget mounted on his wrist at Psycho and blasts her with a spectral buckshot that penetrates her spirit, surpassing her physical and mental senses, feeling like cold death in the spiritual sense, causing intense agony. She lets go of the hostage and falls to the ground. Jared presses a contraption on his belt that triggers a strange bronze and gold gadget to leap off of it and latch itself onto Psycho, building a cocoon-like titanium alloy prison around her. Jared then smacks his belt one last time, triggering a propeller to poke up and begin flying upward, leaving Psycho suspended in the air, bound in place. Jared Parker turns to Jacob and nods, but before he could say anything cool, Jared is immediately tackled to the ground by a sexy and voluptuous humanoid rat woman. She screams, "I got you now, bitch! Give me what's mine! Pay up, Jared!" She shakes Jared crazily as he gets manhandled in confusion. A Dorinthian man in ex-Western Ward military gear appears and pulls the rat lady off of Jared and tells her to calm down. Jared leans up and shouts, "God damn it, Nima, you sexy ass mouse, it's not a good time." "Shut the fuck up, Jared. Make it a good time. You're the creator. Create a good time and make it now. You know what I'm here for, Jared." Jared looks at the Dorinthian man, Colonel Ty Lee, and tells him to control his friend. Ty Lee has a look of embarrassment as his partner, Mima, the sexiest mouse ever, shouts at Jared over an absurd machine that she commissioned to have him create for her. Ty Lee was a tactical genius and immediately assesses everyone on the battlefield and realizes this is really a bad time. Jared shouts for Ty Lee and Mima to assist or get the hell out of here. Mima starts hitting Jared and tells him to make the thing now. When suddenly, several monstrous Oceania Island monster plants sprout up and spray blue mist into the faces of Ty Lee, Mima the sexiest mouse ever, and Jared, sending them directly to sleep until Epony notices several clones of their group all around the forest. Ty Lee was a trickster and could manipulate reality, and by thinking ahead, he had created quite the illusion. Just then, a giant, monstrous plant covered in R-Type's radiant blue energy comes tearing and swiping through the forest, wiping out each of the illusions. We see Colonel Ty Lee, Mima, and Jarrett dive out of the way of Ebony's forest's wrath. Jarrett tosses Mima a device that transforms into mechanical wings, giving her flight as she begins to fire a barrage of special infrared paintballs out of her Alpha-class electromagnetic rifle from the forest's canopy. Mima the sexy mouth coats the forest with a special infrared paint, thus expanding her view, allowing her to see through everything as she fires her exotic rifle through the dense trees at Ebony, who we see dipping and dodging and flipping through the forest to avoid the radiant beams of light radiation. R-Type X and Star Rift charge toward each other and clash in mid-air, both throwing flurries of blows at each other while blocking, parrying, and evading potential knockout punches. We see Jacob outrunning several massive energy vines extremely close to clobbering him and knocking him out of the trees. Jacob leaps off of the tree while firing heat-seeking bullets at Ebony, who we see going toe-to-toe with Colonel Ty Lee on a moving vine. Ebony throws several fiery blows, causing Ty Lee's clothes to catch flame, but Ty Lee strategically places himself out of the path of the bullets while placing several well-placed kicks and punches into Ebony, landing true and sending her stumbling backward. Jarrett comes whizzing by on a strange hovering device he created that begins firing high-impact magneton rounds. Ebony turns into stone, but the impact still launches her off the vine and into a tree. Ty Lee leaps off after her and knees her in the gut, causing them both to crash through the entire tree. Ebony performs a back spiral kick that hits Ty Lee so hard he loses consciousness briefly and regains consciousness just before hitting a branch, shattering his ribs, but he manages to hold on, when suddenly an R-Type X clone appears above him and with both hands blasts a beam of blue energy, sending Ty Lee flying toward the forest floor. But it was just another illusion as Ty Lee begins fighting R-Type's clone up on the massive branches of the tree. Ebony lands behind him, and with a couple of feints, she fakes Ty Lee out and kicks him in the head, but as planned, he lures her into being open and follows up with a crushing elbow to the abdomen and several flashy kicks that hit both R-Type X and Ebony on both sides of him. Suddenly, an ultraviolet beam whizzes across the forest and hits R-Type's clone, obliterating him into pieces. Then another fires at Ebony's leg, but she performs a handstand evading it and begins fighting Ty Lee while on her hands, sending powerful deadly kicks from her almighty legs. Ty Lee dips and dodges until he becomes sluggish and realizes he's been poisoned while pulling barbs out of his forearms. Ebony's toxic kinetic martial art left barbs secreting exotic poisons into the bloodstream all over his body. A large oceanic island spider and pet of Ebony's comes creeping down onto Psycho's helicopter prison and spews acid on it, melting away the titanium and freeing Psycho Aurelio. We cut to Mima flying around looking for a better vantage point while killing R-Type X's clones from a distance. Suddenly, Psycho leaps onto Mima's flying machine and begins bashing her with pointer fingers into different pressure points, but with Mima's ultra reflexes, she turns around with twin revolvers and sends bullets into Psycho, blowing her off. But shortly after, her trigger fingers go numb and her perception is flipped upside down as her own motor functions get inverted, causing her to become incredibly nauseous and incapable of operating Jarrett's complex flying device, sending her crashing toward a tree. But Jarrett whizzes by on his flying pocket craft and catches her while tossing several odd machines that latch onto Psycho's hair, then crawl down into her scalp and electrocute the shit out of her. But by manipulating her own pain receptors, she is unaffected and takes a knife to her own hair like a maniac and cuts it all off. She then pulls out a black market automatic laser rifle and unleashes a devastating barrage at Jarrett and Mima, causing them to spin out of control while Mima projectile vomits all over the forest until they crash into bushes. Star Rift plants his fist into R-Type's face again, then again, as R-Type fails to parry his overwhelming perfected strong style martial arts. R-Type adjusts and begins to instantly evade in Counter-Strike, followed by Star Rift's Counter-Strike, which R-Type ducks, splits into two clones, both throwing kicks into different locations that Star Rift blocks with his arms and legs while absorbing all of the kinetic energy into his body, then unleashes a pulse of destructive energy that stuns both R-Types. Starrift grabs both of R-Type's energy clones by the head and slams them together. One of the closest dissipates before the impact, and R-Type lifts Starrift up and slams him into an energy construct that turns into a wall of R-Type X's, holding out hands filled with Aidoagia energy, lighting Starrift's back up with so much energy that he can't absorb it all. R-Type then puts all of his energy into his fist while running towards Starrift, who is pinned up against the wall, and sends a historic fist of Blue Lotus energy into Starrift's body. And just as expected, Starrift absorbs it all and counterattacks. R-Type combines several of his most lethal techniques, starting with the cannon field to absorb Starrift's blow back into his body as he purposely lets it connect. Once the power is locked into R-Type, he performs King's Will, God's Choice, and reappears above Starrift, flying downward with the finishing blow. Starrift looks up, and before R-Type could land the blow, totally misjudging Starrift's speed, Starrift sends a life-ending face-smashing strike into R-Type, shattering R-Type's wooden log substitution jutsu into millions of little wood splinters. R-Type X blinks back into place under Starrift's feet and performs Mugen Ranbu on the ground, destroying the entire forest floor, sending every enemy up into the air, when suddenly 300 R-Type X clones appear and unleash devastating mid-air combos on everyone in the fucking forest, but with Starrift taking the brunt of the force, who gets completely overwhelmed. R-Type X comes across Starrift's face with 300 rapid-fire punches, leaving him dazed and too weak to absorb anything else. R-Type X's clone kicks Jacob into another clone, who pieces Jacob up and kicks him into another clone, but Jacob dive rolls and fires 2 headshots from his rifle, killing 2 of the 3 clones attacking Mima, the 3rd clone kicking Mima through a tree. A poisoned Ty Lee comes to her aid, but is engaged by 2 more clones at once, but is completely overwhelmed with bone-snapping kicks, sending him to the ground. Then an R-Type clone snaps Ty Lee's leg into 2, as Libra suggested be done with such a deadly combatant. Jared outmaneuvers and evades the hundreds of attacking R-Type clones with the gadget for every situation. When the remaining troopers lose footing from the Mugen Ranbu, the hundreds of clones catch them off guard, disarming and breaking each of the troopers down with incredible precision and planning thanks to Libra. The leader of the troopers was seemingly the most skilled and managed to survive the brunt of R-Type's technique, but is suddenly grabbed up and constricted by Ebony's living forest vines that burst from out under a manhole cover in the street. It slams the trooper into the concrete streets and tosses him into Psycho's armored Cadillac ruins. All of the troopers, battered and crippled, even carrying each other, regroup around the leader and prepare to extract and abort mission. They press buttons on their own belts and lean over to the leader's belt, who is heavily disoriented. Jacob runs over to them and informs them of Haven Guard's resistance and invites them to their base where they can aid them. The troopers say nothing to Jacob and continue to prepare for extraction. An all-white semi-cloaked spaceship arrives and lets down a ladder while raining down heavy suppressing fire, causing those nearby to go into cover. Before Jacob runs into cover, he asks them again to consider joining forces as their enemy is the same. The trooper holding the leader up looks up at Jacob and gives him the finger, and he tells him and his fake-ass planet that they can go fuck. Jacob's eyes widen as the trooper's helmet and head explodes into pieces, sending head and brain matter all over Jacob's face. Seconds after, 3 more shots ring out and 3 more troopers' heads get blown off by a sniper with incredible skill, leaving just one alive. 2 more shots ring, blowing a massive hole into the kneecap of the surviving trooper and then blowing the middle finger off of the trooper that was giving it to Jacob. Jacob runs into cover so not to get sniped. And a black helicopter with the big yellow letters NOX shows up. Mercenaries hop out and snatch up the wounded, surviving trooper against his own will, and they fly off. Jacob looks all around for where the sniper could be, but the forest was just way too dense. How could a shot like that have been pulled off? We cut to the rooftop countless blocks away, far from the Epony's forest. We see a large man with a scarred up face, slick-backed black hair, and a thick beard, pulling his cybernetic eye away from the scope of his sniper. Krypton, a mob enforcer and gun for hire. With his cybernetic hand, he folds up the rifle and tosses it around his back and escapes from the back of the building while calling in his bounty. Expecting at minimum 300 million bizquirks, he watches 3 whole Zarkons fall into his account. A lot more than expected. Which raised some questions. Krypton rolls up some Dorinthian tobacco into a cigar and takes a long drag before pulling off. We cut back to R-Type X's overwhelming Star Rift. With a badly beaten and pummeled body, R-Type then ends his combo with a destructive beam of spiraling black energy to Star Rift's chest, sending him flying through the burning forest, neutralized and out of the way for now. R-Type lands, breathing heavy. It's been some time since he had a steadfast opponent like that, but it's been some time since he fought someone from Raylagar. Suddenly, Jacob falls from the trees and appears behind R-Type X and almost at point-blank range fires the big iron, but the bullet crashes into R-Type's Hansha reflector, deflecting it back into the gun, destroying it and crippling 4 of Jacob's 5 fingers, causing him to fall to his knees, holding his hand. Epony descends upon a large vine and several other vines carrying the unconscious Resistance members, including Mima and Ty Lee, who are then tossed beside Jacob. Psycho Aurelio comes limping up to R-Type and Epony and spits at the defeated Jacob. Jacob accumulates a massive hulking loogie and spits one right back into Psycho's eye. Without hesitation and completely against the plan of killing, Psycho pulls out an Uzi and squeezes off a couple rounds into Jacob's stomach and neck before R-Type subdues Psycho and crushes the gun in her hand. Epony, in anger, screams at Psycho. Psycho pulls out another gun and aims it at Epony's face and prepares to push her wig back out of pure psychotic anger when suddenly they all turn and see Jared loading his comrades onto a platform he deployed that teleports them all away. R-Type X stands calmly over where they were just at. He realizes they didn't have the fist at all anyway. With a blind eye, loss of hearing, and a broken jaw, R-Type X turns to see where the mysterious Raylagarian warrior was, but he seemed to have vanished without a trace, although he could never sense his energy anyway. Anarchy 12 calls into R-Type X and updates him with new information. R-Type takes a seat on the forest floor and begins to meditate on the recent encounter. Epony takes a knee as well. Psycho calms down and walks away while reporting that the fist was not with the leader of Haven Guard. Epony waits for Psycho to leave and looks at R-Type with major concern. She tells him that this is the wrong path, R-Type. R-Type's exposed eye, filled with blood, looks into her eyes. He knows there's much truth in her words. But there's truth in everything. And truth doesn't determine the order in which all things should unfold, he says. R-Type generates a bead of light and goes to place it in her hand. But Epony isn't so fast to open up her hands. Epony asks R-Type if he truly believes this. Suddenly, Star Rift bursts from up under R-Type and Epony with a head-shattering uppercut knocking R-Type X backward, and then he spins right into a neck-snapping kick into Epony. But Epony blocks it with her leg, then grabs Star Rift's leg with biceps augmented by the planet, and Buster swings him into a nearby great tree, causing it to collapse on itself. Star Rift leaps back out of the wood mound and clobbers Epony with the left explosive hook, then a right, then a left, but she ducks it and sends a bow-deflating knee into his gut. Then R-Type X appears with a cyclone of Blue Lotus petals, spiraling into a punch that leads into 30 lightning-fast kicks, then backflips off of a dazed Star Rift's head and points both hands like finger guns and fires energy blasts out of each of them. But Star Rift expertly and skillfully grabs both waves of energy, and like 2 giant ropes, he swings them into an oncoming Epony, crushing her under and between the waves of raw power, sending her flying into a crashed Resistance truck unconscious. Star Rift turns to R-Type and tightens the white sash around his waist and warns him that the old ways of Raylagar are returning. R-Type's Libra calculates that with next 20 minutes fighting him, he should have him completely figured out. Then from there, we'll fight him without energy as not to fuel his energy absorption. But he couldn't spare 20 minutes. Epony was just hit by one of his deadliest energy attacks. He needs to make sure she was We see Epony standing up to her feet and ready to go. The nativity of a city of trees birthed a living forest around her, creating an endless source of natural energy empowering her. On Epony's journey to prove herself, she learns the power of creativity, an ingredient of combat intelligence. Archetype looks back at Starrift, and Starrift from Epony back to Archetype. He looks as if he wasn't expecting her to bounce back. Starrift was a very intelligent combatant himself. He knew that facing the Wandering King would become the fight of his life. It could spare no odds on another enemy. Archetype watches as Starrift slowly fades away from sight, leaving no energetic trace. Starrift looks into Archetype's eyes with the look of pure disgust and hatred. He fades away. Epony exhales, then falls backward on a big leaf. She asks Archetype who the hell was that. Archetype, the Wandering King, calm and dry, tells her he is merely salt on the planet, offspring of a dishonorable failure. Dravko Mas trudges through the forest, shredded up with torn clothes after fending off some terrifying creatures. He spots John Musket Mouth's ships anchored on the coast and was quite ready to leave this hellhole. We see two of John's pirates just getting back from an egg run, and both place down large sacks of gamma eggs. Just as they lean back up, they hear heavy breathing behind them, and they both turn around and face Drav. One pulls out their rifle on him, but Drav grabs and breaks the barrel, then chops both pirates in the neck, damn near severing it in two. Drav pulls up the anchor, then spends a great deal of time trying to figure out how to operate and sail the ship, but had zero knowledge of such, other than what he saw on TV. Drav hears a large group of John's pirates approaching the ship that he's trying to jack. He runs to hide behind the door in the shadows of the captain's quarters. The pirates come aboard and place more gamma loot eggs. The pirates come aboard and place more loot down, but immediately draw their laser pirate swords when they see blood on the deck. Drav can hear the pitter-patter of about 20 plus pirates searching the large, beautiful ship that is the Musket Barrel. He sneaks into the mini bathhouse within John's quarters when suddenly, Drav runs into a butt-naked John Musket Mouth with his laser flintlock pistol pointed directly into Drav's face, not to mention his cock-out. As a reaction, Dravko grabs John's firearm to disarm him until he realizes it's just a statue of himself. Cocky bastard. He calms down and begins to cough up shrapnel-laced acid from the AP Gravis round lodged into his acid gland. Drav realizes he's being watched when he turns and sees 3 beautiful healing maidens shivering in fear from the scaly G-type. It reminded him of high school. Dravko tells them to remain quiet or he'll break their chicken head necks like celery sticks. A voice shouts into John's cabin demanding the intruder come out with their hands up. Drav sees the dark silhouettes of pirates surrounding the quarters through the foggy windows. A cocky and brolic pirate screams for Dravko to come out one last time as his pirate crew remains behind him ready. When suddenly, appearing behind him, dead center of all, Rezanok and Makai appear. Before anyone could react, Rezanok's arm forms into a red-hot, eviscerating blade with serrated edges, and he jabs it into the back of a pirate and brings it across 4 more pirates, spilling their insides onto the deck. Nam's arms and legs catch ablaze in golden nuclear flames as she leaps into the air with the deadly, impressive cyclone of kicks that send the remaining pirates spiraling off of their feet in purifying fire. A pirate swings his laser sword at Nam, but Rez slashes his arm off and triggers a mutation to occur within the pirate, causing multiple arms to burst out of his own neck. The arms then pull off his own head, killing himself. Nam clotheslines a pirate with blinding speed and like a golden fireball, blitzes between hordes of pirates, piecing them up with demolishing martial arts, setting both them and the ship ablaze. Drav hears fighting and commotion and smells burning flesh over a nuclear fire and immediately recognizes that smell. Drav steps out and walks right into Tude, who greets him. As a reaction to the creepy bastard, Drav swings, chopping at Tude, but he gracefully dodges out of the way. Drav tells him not to sneak up on him like that. Tude tells Drav that they're leaving to handle important matters. We see Rezanok pull his arm blade out of a pirate and his arm returns to normal. He turns and sees Nam overcome with rage as she goes to town, throwing bullet punches into a bigger pirate's belly, then finishes with a flaming uppercut that sends him and the entire ship ornament flying off of the ship into flaming pieces. We see Nam Ki and Rezanok greeting their old partner, Dravko Maz, and they all walk back into the cognitive realm as they leave John's ship, the Musket Barrel, in bad condition. Before Drav steps into the portal, he stops and grabs as many gamma egg bags as possible, then vanishes into Nam's portal. We cut to the little Vinryusai Ali, walking beside Cervantes de Ageha with a map of the world made by some awesome players from the Gamma Haven community. Ali is educating Cervantes on her Rhaelagarian heritage. Cervantes pretends to know a lot of this already and impresses Ali with her supposed knowledge, but not nearly as impressed as Cervantes is with the child's wealth of history. Cervantes was becoming great friends with Ali, who now begins vlogging and bragging about how she is on the legendary Monster Island with the legendary Cervantes de Ageha. Her fan base is going wild. Cervantes holds Ali's selfie hand in place as she shuffles into frame, making sure her legendary bosom is in the shot, as she talks hot shit into the live feed, motivating the millions of women watching, young and old, to be strong, sexy, and encourages them to drop out of school and become pirates because street doctors don't get paid the big bucks. We see John Musketmouth rubbing his temples, annoyed by all the obnoxious bravado spewing out of Cervantes' face, when suddenly Cervantes grabs John's coat and pulls him in, asking him where the hell he's leading them to. A giant Rhaelagarian wasp nest crashes in between them, triggering an army of venomous wasps to begin attacking them. John and Cervantes swing their swords around aimlessly while irritating the wasps even more. Ali, like the flash of light she is, slashes off the wings of every Rhaelagarian wasp with godly precision as to preserve the beautiful insects that hold this ecosystem together. She knew the wings would grow back. John angrily reminds Cervantes to keep her distance due to the seemingly bad juju caused by the inverted effects of their incredible luck, spelling nothing but disaster for them when they're close. Cervantes threatens John that he better hope that those eggs are worth the hassle as she jams her jewelry-encrusted finger into his neck. On the third poke of his flesh, it begins to downpour and lightning strikes by their feet. John stumbles. He then pushes Cervantes away, and that's when he notices a sack of gamma eggs laying on the ground. Cervantes' eyes light up as she goes to pry the sack from the grips of a dead space pirate looked to have been mauled to death by something only hungry for its legs. John Smith turns around and pulls down a massive leaf, revealing exactly what he came for. The giant tree that bore special gamma eggs from its branches. John, Ali, and Cervantes stare up in awe at the great tree. Cervantes holds the sack of eggs tight and tells John for the record that these are hers. Ali, excited to get an egg, points her phone up at the tree so the world can see. John didn't think they'd be so big. Perhaps he could bring the musket barrel around and have his men load the ship. Suddenly, Mistress Scorn's right hand, the legendary space pirate Nova, and with him pirate reinforcements, come walking from around the tree. Nova's vibrant blood-red armor sparkles under the hot Rhaelgarian sun. A laid-back John Smith moves his red dreads behind his shoulder and points his gun at Nova. Cervantes steps forward and with great bravado tells and announces who she is and informs Nova she is a captain of the Rhaelgarian Royal Blood Sharks and commands the mutt to step aside. Nova isn't happy about the name calling, and if it weren't for the intensity and ferocity he senses in her, he'd slit her throat. Nova turns his back to them and pulls an egg off of the branch and looks at it. Then them. Nova laughs at Cervantes' so-called pirating on this little made-up fish tank of a planet. He tells her she's small time, and as expected, this riles her up. Cervantes begins to storm closer to Nova while unloading a verbal assault filled with vile name-calling and instructions on what they can do with their mouths and Nova's doggy dick. Nova's eyes glow red, and he pulls out twin scimitars that burst with celestial light. Cervantes laughs and cranks up her reality manipulation, making her saber sword appear extremely sharp and glow as it begins to rain roses from the sky. Ali's face gets serious and transfers her live feed over to her cam, which hovers in the air and captures all of the action in Ultra 8K HD. Nova gives the signal and his crew point their rifles at Cervantes and begin to fire, but all of their rifles malfunction. One of them even explode in their hands, blowing their upper body clear off of their legs. Vinryusai Ali spirals through the air at blazing speed, unsheathing Yggdrasil, her adaptive empathic weapon and tool of the kings Vinryusai, bright light of Rhaelgar. She plunges her blade into the pirate's neck with one hand, rips it through with both hands, splitting her broadsword into dual katanas that she then begins to spin at high velocity, deflecting the now operational rifle's beams of laser lights. Ali's supernatural swordsmanship was impossible, and the reason she was a Vinryusai in training. She plunges her broadsword into the pirate's neck with one hand, rips it through with two hands, splitting the broadsword into dual katanas that she begins to spin at high speed velocity, deflecting the now operational rifle's beams of lasers. Ali's supernatural swordsmanship was impossible, and the very reason she was a Vinryusai in training. She hacks into a pirate's neck, then spin slashes with the other sword, lopping it off as she rolls to the ground, zigzagging through all of their legs using her agility and small size. A space pirate almost takes her head off when he brings a vibro knife to her neck, but she slides under and severs his arm off, then runs up his leg while combining her katanas into an 18-inch razor-sharp wazakashi that she jams into her enemy's chest and holds him in place as a body shield from the incoming beams of fire. Cervantes de Agueha and John Musketmouth stay a good 10 yards apart from each other in order not to affect. Cervantes de Agueha and John Musketmouth stay a good 10 yards apart in order to not affect each other's luck, while they fire their high-powered kinetic flintlock pistols as bullets miraculously whiz by them or fizzle out before reaching them. John trips over an exotic, fiendish, eyeball-snapping turtle, causing him to fall out of the way of a bullet that would have killed him. When he lands, he accidentally pulls the trigger and ends up shooting the turtle just before it could rip out his eye. John also spots frenzied and rage-misted pirates charging at him and Cervantes from behind. The hot climate of the jungle baked the rage mist into the brains of all the pirates on the island. One tries to tackle John but trips in the mud and breaks its neck before reaching him. John shrugs, then impales a berserking pirate trying to push itself onto him. John comes face to face with a raging pirate on his saber, and he recognized that pirate. It was one of his own. Oh, poor Sadie. You're not my type, I told you this. He blows her a kiss, then pops her top and pushes himself back to back with Cervantes, who is now also fending off rage-misted crazies. They begin to fight near each other, relying on one another's obnoxious pirate trash talk and quips for awareness, all while insulting each other and even kicking each other at one point during their walks in the middle of a shrinking wave of rage-misted crazies. Neither John or Cervantes' forte was full-out combat. John often spoke with his cannons pointed at your house, and Cervantes with her unrivaled tenacity, but almost always they relied on their wits, and today was no different. The two step in closer, utilizing the bad luck that they produce around them as a method of defense, leaving their attackers off balance and vulnerable. Meanwhile, Allie flips, rolls, and hops across the shoulders of the last few remaining space pirates while switching between all of the built-in weapons within her fuse sword. Allie lands and is immediately attacked by Nova, who jet propulses through the air, unleashing masterful flurries of slashes, all parried by Vin Ryusai, using dual knives and a katana clenched in her mouth. Allie kicks and slashes back at Nova, pushing him back the other way. Her barrage of attacks was so fast and unrelenting that he couldn't defend from them, and she spits the knife out of her mouth into his eye, gouging it out. He growls and calls her a brat, then slashes at her with the charged up saber of celestial light that sends Allie flying into a tree. Allie spin slashes through the tree, removing the impact, sending the tree home to a nightmarish fiendish monster crashing down into Nova. But Nova ends his life with 2 slashes from his celestial blades. Allie darts back up to Nova, but runs directly into a supernova of white star light that burns and roasts Allie's face off, eyebrows and all, blowing her back into the air before Allie could hit the ground. A glowing white Nova in all spiky white fur and neon blue eyes appears right over her. She looks shocked at his sudden burst of speed and power all of a sudden as he cracks her skull with the flat of his blade, sending her flying into another tree. Nova then sends several slicing waves of raw celestial light toward her for the kill. Cervantes de Agueja appears and captures unconscious Allie and holds onto her tight and closes her eyes, bracing herself. Debris from the crashing spaceship lands in front of them, blocking the path of the white light, saving them from obliteration. Nova hovers in the air, and he gets word that the enemy pirate's fleet is too large and isn't lacking in firepower either. They need to hurry. Nova calls in reinforcements to come with large nets as he flies up and down the tree, cutting eggs free from it in one fell swoop before emptying the tree completely with none left for anyone and all for the Mistress. The space pirates pack up and depart. Nova stands on the deck of his ship, looking down at his foes within the jungle while clutching onto a bag of special eggs. As directed, he prepares to have the eggs sent to the labs being built within all of the brothels within Haven. Using Skriller's research, Scorn will have gamma creatures empowered with planet mutation, then sold as part of the intense sexual brothel experience. Suddenly, appearing from behind Nova, uncloaking from its camo, we see the mysterious, skull-faced mercenary who plunges 2 long knives into the back of Nova, causing him to lose grip of the bags of special eggs and drops them over the deck. Nova explodes into his celestial form, pushing the merc back, but this doesn't stop the mercenary's assault. Nova, though severely wounded, manages to wreck the mysterious attacker and tosses him over the deck into the jungle along with the bag. We cut to Cervantes, trudging through the jungle while carrying an unconscious Allie. She's pissed off. Not only because John Musketmouth got away again without paying his debts, but he also took the damn bags. The bastard. Now she just has to get back to one of his ships to get off this island. She looks down at a banged up Allie in her arms. That glowing dog really did a number on her. She wishes Allie would wake up so she could turn off the stupid cam device following them around, making notification sounds driving her up the wall. Suddenly, falling from the sky and crashing right in front of her is the skull-faced mercenary, wrecked and barely moving. Soon after, the sack of special eggs falls from the sky and lands right into her arms on top of Allie. Cervantes de Agueja's eyes light up. She was no stranger to great fortune, and borderline expected something like this to happen, if she were to be honest. It was part of being a legendary pirate, and not just any pirate, but the captain of the lavishly electrifying Monster Island conquerors. Cervantes ignores the mercenary heap. Whoever or whatever it was dead as a doorknob. We see Cervantes walking down the jungle path, cheesing with a mouthful of jewels and diamonds, when suddenly popping up from behind her in the near distance, we see the skullhead mercenary broken and banged up. It turns around and looks at her, then goes completely camo. Cervantes stops and turns around, thinking she heard something and sees nothing. Suddenly, the skull-faced merc appears with both laser knives drawn behind Cervantes for the kill. But when Cervantes turns around, the reflection of the sun bounces off of her glistening, sweaty, busty, legendary cleavage and burns a glare into its vision, stunning him. Ali awakens and darts out of Cervantes' arms using the absolute speed Infinitum, and with her supernatural swordsmanship, Ali strikes 9 vital spots counterclockwise with kendo-style precision. Each chop and slash cutting deep into the attacker's frame before finally thrusting her blade into the heart of the skull merc. Ali spins around, ripping her sword through a fraction she has yet to create. Clean, and in an instant, the mercenary stands frozen. Ali sheathes her blade while throwing a rude and insulting signature hand gesture at her target, as she and every fan of hers from all walks of life around the world, from little Dulaman and Torresano's children to grown men in their early 30s who should be looking for a job, all hold out the same repulsive hand gesture the parents hate to see. And in unison, all of Ali's world's fans shout, "Boy!" as black and red blood burst from all of its measured gashes like a fucking fire hydrant. The mercenary then explodes into pieces dramatically. Ali gains 4 new subscribers that moment. In sheer joy, she pulls the phone to her face and welcomes Jarinsky, Beardlord Divine, Roman numeral 2, and player 2988 to the community. Cervantes picks up Ali and shakes her out of happiness she's alive, completely ignoring the kid's burns. Cervantes was more excited about the fact that she had a guide again who could get her off of this damn Rayligarian hellscape as she swipes away at tentacled insects trying to stab her with toxic venom. We cut to John Musketmouth running through the jungle with Cervantes' bag of eggs, laughing to himself. The day he pays her back is the day he's eating a glass sandwich with Steel Block's coffee. Fuck that. John respected Cervantes, though, for sure. If she wasn't so damn crazy and intelligent, crazy intelligent, he'd put a bullet in her head ages ago. John Smith stops and hides behind a tree when he hears voices. He looks around the tree and spots a giant facility partially hidden in the dark. It was an Eve's Entertainment Inc. building, of all places. John couldn't recall any death jungle scenes in any of the Detective of the Damned films, and those were his favorite. He thought it was odd that a place like this would be here. But his attention shifts instantly when a hovering van full of scientists arrives. From the back of the van, they pull out a special containment unit containing multiple eggs. John smiles in relief as he holds out his beloved treasure piece, a symbol of his mutation, and he kisses it. We cut to the 2 scientists, both carrying the case gently to ensure its safety, when suddenly one of them gets startled at the sight of Musketmouth popping out of the bushes with his pistol aimed at them. They even almost drop their eggs, but John threatens and demands he not drop those fucking eggs or he's gonna drop his egg. Damn it. He'll drop his egg. John puts his pistol up to the head of the clumsy scientist and snatches the case of eggs from him, then blows his head off of his shoulders. The remaining scientist screams and pisses himself. John jams his pistol into their nose and tells them to drop the car keys into his pocket. The scientist complies and drops the key to him. John wasn't going to shoot him, but he spots something fairly large lurking in the bushes behind him and needs something to buy time. So John Musketmouth, the charming killer he is, puts one hot kinetic round into the scientist's stomach, making food for the monster thing that's gonna hop out any second now. John hops into the hover van along with the special eggs and peels off while the scientist gets mauled by a Rayligarian vapor-hoofed beast mare. John cruises down all the right paths through the jungle, avoiding all danger until he reaches his own ship and the majority of his fleet waiting for him. All of the pirates cheer and wave ale in the air at the sight of his return. John hurries onto the ship and up into his quarters with the special eggs. He then pokes his head back out the window and tells his crew to hurry up and pull up the anchor and sail out. No more passengers on board. His crew run over to pull up the anchor, but before they get there, Vinryusai Ali zips in between them and the pulley with her sword drawn, her face still burnt. We cut to John admiring the case of eggs, while his healing maidens fondle him to health, when suddenly, kicking in the door, the massive, fiendish, multi-armed, fire-breathing pirate god, Cervantes de Agueja, slithers into John's quarters, or at least that's how it looked to all of them. Cervantes grabs John by the collar with her saber pointed up into his throat, and she begins to return to normal. John gives her a charming toothy smile that causes a slight tingle in her heart, but not enough for her to not want to still kill him, and he knew that. The sun sets over the seas as we see Vinryusai standing on the deck, looking outward toward haven as they sail back. Her cam deactivated for the night. She looks determined because there was a tragedy happening. Mistress Scorn walks down the classy and velvety Victorian interior of her lovely ship, the Asylum. One of Mistress Scorn's many eyes captures a hidden figure in her enhanced peripherals, and she stops walking. We see Shiro Aoi stealthing in the shadows, although cover blown. Scorn greets the stranger she cannot see and invites him to reveal himself. Shiro's clone remains in the shadows, but he steps out from behind her. Just as he steps out, Mistress Scorn's webbing entangles his leg and pulls him up to hang from the ceiling, the webbing sticky and unbreakable. Shiro dangles, hesitant to do anything drastic in the mysterious substance he was wrapped in. Mistress Scorn laughs sexily and lets down her long, flowing, pitch-black hair like water pouring down a statue of pearl. The mistress tells him not to worry, it's just webbing. And so Shiro becomes water and splashes onto one knee, free from bondage. Scorn sizes him up as a spy, and she was right. Shiro was collecting information. Mistress Scorn gets closer to Shiro comfortably and tells him if information is what he's looking for, then stalk no more. She weaves an immaculate web with both hands. Shall I interest you in a plethora of knowledge about the hidden society of sorcerers that feed on your species like eternal cattle? Shiro's eyebrow raises. What? This information could lead to a breakthrough with Naboo intelligence. She had to have been referring to the cult. Scorn then proposes that they barter. She assumes he has the inside scoop on geopolitics and nations of the world. She identifies he is of Solian descent, a very busy race. She begins to coerce him into the exchange. We cut to a Shiro clone watching Amanda V meet with corrupt Naboo council members, plotting on Void Makai. Shiro certainly knew a lot of what was happening in Naboo. We then cut to the real Shiro suffering from a body of broken bones in the freezing Alta Mountains, trying to stay conscious. In order to sustain his many clones' vital duties. Shiro would have fallen for her enticing offer, but he was noble. Shiro says nothing and in the blink of an eye dissipates his clone. In fact, Shiro recalls all of the clones he had spread throughout the world, making it easier to sustain the ones with the pertinent information. Mistress Scorn shrugs and continues down the corridor. She puts Clyde at ease by putting him in charge of protecting Skriller and his research facilities. She expresses how honored she is to have such a powerful G-type in her ranks, and level sets with him to offset his disposition toward her blackmail. Scorn also puts the first prime jumper and recipient of the Panet phenomenon, Scott Stone, in charge of guarding the entire asylum. Once these matters are tidied up, she makes her way back to meet with the Virgin Tears. The diplomat of the Virgin Tears is Galactic Expanse. He orchestrates the process of discovering and welcoming lost planets and structures into the galaxy. Scorn approaches the small yellow man, whom we see standing with the peculiar woman. It was the same refugee we saw with Tempest at the Valkyrie camp. The Virgin Tears have been notified of the planet's turmoil and opposing ideologies by Mistress Scorn. She told him everything. She has shown the Virgin Tears the good and the bad of the instigator's artificial planet, and have determined that it was so technologically advanced it could be a boon and that could not be overlooked. To ensure it's suitable for the diplomat sent angels to familiarize themselves with the two philosophies defining the planet. A group of Virgin Tears angels tasked with making Anarchy a victim in order to test his own philosophy, as well as an agent sent to understand Tempest's true intentions. When the diplomat receives news that the troopers have been killed, he immediately considers the planet's threat level incredibly hostile. The refugee spy divulges what she learned from Tempest, and the diplomat keeps it in consideration. After a discussion with Scorn, he informs her that the decision to bring the planet into the system will be made shortly. The decision has been made. We will make a decision. He adds that they will need to confiscate Skriller's planet device for population balance. Scorn detects that he's lying in his body language, but cooperates for the time being, and has Clyde hand over the device to the Virgin Tears, when suddenly, reaching through a vortex, we see dozens of black chains bind Clyde's arm tight. Out leaps Dravko Maz, grabbing a pirate's face and crushing it with his bare hands, then chops down another pirate. Clyde is hit with deep mind-numbing pulses that befuddle and cloud the concept of his current circumstances. Makai comes across his face with a stunning fist, then jams her bangles into his head with a flurry of wrist strikes. Tude swings his black chains, tossing a battered and disoriented Clyde into the air. Resonat comes soaring across the ship with a hand of glowing red electricity and thrusts its hand into Clyde's chest, but is stopped in motion as if frozen by time itself inches away from Clyde as his eyes glow white. Resonat's arm is immediately snatched off and pulled into a tide of orbital momentum. Then Resonat's body is flung into the opposite direction. The chains pulsate, numbing Clyde's mind again, and in reaction, Clyde causes Dravko Maz, Tude, and Nam's entire pocket of space to explode. But they all reappear, falling from above through Nam's cognitive realm, landing beside him. Dravko Maz tackles Clyde to the ground, then slams him. Clyde places his hand on Dravko and sends him flying across the room into Scorn's computer monitors. Tude sends 2 swift kicks into Clyde's head, then pulls him with the chains into 3 devastating punches from an angered Makai. Clyde, in a state of desperation, prepares to blow up everything around him when Resonat comes from behind with the double-handed electrokinetic hammer fist that rings like thunder and causes Clyde's brains to explode within his skull. Dead, just as planned. Tude lassos the device into his possession. Mistress Scorn teleports behind Tude, grabs the device, then blinks away behind pirate reinforcements holding the device under her arm. Mistress Scorn invites the safe haveners to converse. All of her pirates engaged with high-tech rifles and energy sabers. She begins to speak again when a violent bolt of red lightning strikes through every pirate, skewering them and Mistress Scorn's hand with 1 billion joules of red electricity, roasting them all and blowing Mistress's hand off of her wrist. Appearing on the other end of the lightning, we see a fierce Resonat snatching the device away with his arm of red electricity. Resonat attempts to kick her, then blast her just to see how her mutation works. Scorn evades the kick with swift spider-like agility, then blinks out of the way of his blast. Rezanok's eyes adapts to the rapid movement as his nervous system mutates, making him ultra-reflexive. Just before he goes to blast Scorn again, Scott Stone, aka Captain Quake, appears and begins to manipulate the electricity within Rezanok's body using his geomancy, then magnetizes the entire area around him within 15 feet radius, disrupting Rezanok's ability to act. Mistress Scorn calls for more reinforcements as more space pirates come running into her ship's quarters with guns blazing. She demands that no one gets away with the Panet device. We cut to a group of her pirates running across the ship with the Panet device in hand, when Tude slithers in between all of them with agility and grace and attacks. His kick snaps the neck of a pirate, then his chains tighten around the pirate's neck and snaps another as he jams 12-inch wrist knives into the throat of a pirate carrying the Panet device and takes it from him. We then cut to Rez being manipulated by Scott, Captain Quake Stone's geomancy. Rez turns and smiles at Scott. His eyes turn as deep as the void of space with intent to kill. Rezanok's freakish DNA triggers a genetic reaction within Scott, causing a mutation to blossom within. Scott's internal organs begin to turn to ice and his blood into water. This causes unimaginable discomfort within Scott as his body was not built for it. Scott lets go of his hold of Rezanok, and Rezanok walks toward him menacingly, fascinated and curious as to what he did to him. For science, he flashes back to what Tude taught him about power manifestation. Scott, slowly dying from half-frozen organs, could not understand what was happening to him. And in his ignorance, he goes to release a seismic shockwave, but in turn shatters his insides as blood sprays out of his eyes and mouth, collapsing to the ground, incapacitated. We see Makai and Dravko Mas taking out pirates attacking Tude. A pirate brings his laser saber across Dravko, but he steps in and around, evading all of the swings that could cut through him like butter, then crushes them with bone-breaking strikes. We see a teary-eyed Nam, now flaming with rage, cutting through countless pirates with deadly precision and destructive martial artistry. Tude swiftly evades incoming gunfire while dismantling attackers, flanking Nam and Drav. Mistress Scorn teleports in for the device one last time, but Rezanok's reflexive lightning movement intercepts her at every turn, making the device too dangerous to pursue. Scorn reappears beside the Virgin Tears diplomat. Tude, holding the device, looks at Scorn and the Virgin Tears and threatens that if they do not stop interfering in his experiments, he will keep their souls forever. Nam looks at Tude in confusion. Scorn tells him it's a gold mine, and Tude laughs and tells her there's no gold here, as he turns and walks into Nam's cognitive realm, followed by each of the safe haveners. Rezanok stops and takes one last glimpse at all of the ship around him. His blackened deep space eyes loom over Scorn's hologram star map. He then enters the vortex, leaving no trace behind. The diplomat stands up and brushes himself off. He informs Scorn that this fake planet violates Regulation 7A through 7C and all of Regulation 13 and thus cannot become part of the galaxy. Scorn knows this is bullshit and that he's emotional right now. He ignored Regulation 13 up until the device was taken out of the picture. Scorn tells him fine. She's sure the neighboring star system wouldn't mind a planet full of killing machines, gods, and surgically transitioned cybernetic centaurs. The diplomat cuts her off and tells her that cannot be. He's contacting the Queen to have this inhumane experiment put to an end, destroyed. The diplomat boards his ship and departs. And Scorn doesn't look pleased. Marshal Mesa stands out on the deck of the ship for fresh air. He pulls back his coyote costume mascot hood and takes big, deep breaths. Marshall hopes to get Jacob's letter to Makai before a war breaks out in Naboo. Also, how the hell is he going to convince Looper Kin to leave the fist in Makai's care? We see Looper Kin sitting inside of the fort made of freight containers, guarding the fist. He looks intense and in deep thought. How the fuck would we trust someone else with this weapon? He'd sooner attach it to his own ass and use it for himself than to give it to anyone else. Looper twirls Jacob's letter to Makai in his hands. He gives Jacob the benefit of the doubt and figures whatever would convince a Naboo king to work with some Haven punks could maybe convince him. Everyone knows the Naboo loved their ancient alien technology. Looper holds up a gadget he bought from Mesa Mart that emits some of the best light he's ever seen on a thingamajigger. Using the light, he reads Jacob's letter without opening it. To Makai Funoichi, future king. Hello, Makai. I will be dropping any formalities and getting straight to the point. I do not have much time to pen this letter as I have enemies currently closing in on me from every side. It seemed like a waste of time, so you will have to forgive me. My name is Jacob Bastian, and I am writing you to ask for your help. Haven City, as you know, is under the rule of a tyrant by the name of Anarchy 12. Until recently, though, there have been some multiple factions that could challenge his rule in some capacity or another. But this has been completely flipped on its head. With the destruction of the gate and the disappearance of Tempest, I have stepped up to my best ability. I am an old war veteran, and I have seen what happens to a nation when a ruler who does not give a damn about the people rules completely unopposed, and I swear by the elder existence I will never let such things happen to my home. As such, I have started a resistance movement called the Haven Guard, and we are set on fighting for as long as it takes to dethrone anarchy and make the city of Haven beautiful again. Utilizing my background as an ex-career mercenary, I will forge my ragtag militia into a guerrilla army worth its salt, but I do have one rather large problem. Anarchy has shut down the black market in Haven. Without the black market, I have no reliable way to fund and supply the rebellion for an extended period of time, which is why I'm asking you for help. I'm asking you to fund and supply the Haven Guard, not for me, but for the sake of Haven and its people. And remember that any help you send our way will basically be driving a shiv into Anarchy's ribs. While I'm sure you would need time to think all this over, I only ask that you think fast, because while I am good and I have gathered good people to my cause, I don't know how long we can last against someone as powerful as Anarchy. Especially since he's gathering powerful things, I guess would be the most accurate term for his side at least. Let me make it clear that Anarchy's twisted obsessions will not be contained in Haven forever. So if you don't help us stop him now, it will not be long before his obsession spreads beyond Haven to all corners of the world. One way or another, my revolution and I will face this tyrant and his metal monstrosities as men and women of honor. If you do decide to help, then we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. If you don't, at least do us a favor in passing our plea to those who would answer its call. Sincerely, Jacob Bastian, leader of the Haven Guard. P.S. The guys who delivered this letter should have also brought you something that is too dangerous to be kept where Anarchy can get it. Consider it a gift. Or if you prefer, a bribe. I personally don't care what you think it is as long as you help us. Get his hand. Looper tucks the letter back into his pocket. Jacob was right. Anarchy must absolutely not get his hands on this fist. It has to stay out of Haven, and unless Looper decides to live in Naboo, it's the only way he can see that it doesn't. Unless they give it to this King Jabroni. The ship comes to a complete stop. Looper Kin stands up quickly, perplexed. He looks out to the balcony and sees Marshall, and Marshall looks at Looper. They both look at the captain's quarters. They both go to check on the Kimhead. Looper suspects he's probably getting high. They peer through the glass, and Looper was right. The Terrasan Kimhead is huffing luxury with one of his drug cronies. Looper glances at Marshall and tells him to get his boy. We're sitting ducks right now. Marshall warned this guy numerous times he'd fired him if he didn't drop the drug habit. A late shipment meant delayed income, but this time it could mean death. But wait. Looper and Marshall don't recall a second person being on the ship. Marshall and Looper burst in and grab the stranger junkie by the shoulder. Ivan Bakara turns around donning a high-tech ninja mask made of pure obsidian steel intricately designed with the depictions of souls and torment. With his photographic memory, Marshall immediately identifies this old man as a G-type who had a hand in the Gate massacre. Long, thin tubes that run down from the mask into his shadowy cloak, shape-shifting from the junkie's clothes, begin to fill with the vibrant neon yellow as a great plume of toxic mist bursts out of the mask and into the face of Marshall. Marshall gags, and off pure hypercognitive reflex, his eyes glow, and he throws a punch at light speed, smashing into Ivan's obsidian mask, damn near breaking his own hand. But within seconds, throws several more punches that get stronger and stronger, all within a span of seconds, that shatter his mask, smashing his face in. Ivan drops the luxury pipe and stumbles backward into the corner. His shadowy cloak spreads throughout the walls of the room, engulfing it in pure shadow. Looper pulls out his cannon on Ivan, assuming Marshall is punching a bad guy, and fires. Ivan, now a massive shadow, evades it as the whites of his eyes fade into the void, only to reappear beside Looper and sends a rib-shattering knee into Looper, then stabs Looper several times in a flurry of toxic knife jabs before fading back into the shadows again. Looper's thick skin, WWC vest, and stellar immune system absorbs the brunt, and Looper goes to backhand Ivan, who is now gone, but the shadow captures his fist and swings Looper around into a flying kick combo Ivan delivers from the shadows above, with a toxic boot knife cutting up his face. Ivan's ninja prowess kept Looper off guard, however, was light work for oversoul Marshall, who appears in between Ivan and Looper and throws 6 precise punches into Ivan's body, then a lower power kick sending Ivan back into the shadows. Ivan reappears behind Marshall's junkie friend and swipes several shurikens across his throat, killing him, and then with the same shurikens throws them toward Marshall, who captures all 7 of them with 2 fingers without looking. Marshall couldn't even believe the feats he was accomplishing, but it felt like second nature to him. In fact, everything began to feel like an outer body experience. Marshall goes toe-to-toe with Ivan in an intense hand-to-hand battle of agility and precision. Marshall's hypercognitive state was entirely too effective against Ivan's deceptive ninjutsu, and he was barely fast enough to avoid Marshall's attacks. Ivan goes to fade away into the void, but Marshall's oversoul body is able to extend past all planes of existence and grapples Ivan, pulling him back into a sick combo. Marshall sends one last kick to take out Ivan when suddenly his leg snaps into the other direction, breaking it like a branch. Marshall falls to the ground as his own coyote suit begins to pummel, twist, and beat Marshall to death. Ivan begins laughing while orchestrating the sentient coyote mascot suit with his hands. Marshall tries to rip the suit off of him, but is being crippled and maimed by the costume, essentially trying to crush him into a ball while forcing him to punch himself and do obnoxious, unsafe backflips. Looper aims his cannon and puts a bullet into Ivan's chest. Ivan falls to his knee, then fades into the void. A massive arm comes shattering through the glass, grabbing Looper by the neck and pulls him out of the captain's quarters and body slams him into the ground. The bartender, Peacekeeper, lifts its massive fists up and goes to squash Looper, but Looper rolls out of the way onto his feet. A laser tomahawk comes swinging, and Looper grabs the arm of the Apache android and puts its cannon in his face and blows it off. The Apache kicks Looper back into the bartender, who grabs Looper from behind and prepares to break him in half until Marshall Mesa, in nothing but boxer shorts, brings his leg sweeping across the bartender's head, taking it clear off. Looper throws the bartender over his shoulder. Looper throws the bartender over his shoulder, but the bartender lands on his feet and instead throws Looper over it into a freight container. Marshall evades bullets flying from the outlaw's quick draw as Marshall closes in the gap between he and the four-armed desperado. Once close, the desperado begins slashing away at Marshall, evades it effortlessly, and sends an oversoul punch that penetrates the physical realm, including the priest's shields, sending the desperado flying across the ship. Looper stumbles out of the freight container and sees the headless bartender, the Apache, the outlaw, desperado, and priest all regrouping in circle around Marshall Mesa. They were outnumbered, that's for sure, but Marshall was faring quite well. Perhaps they had a chance after all. He then realizes the ninja pirate guy is missing. Where's Ivan? And Looper makes a run toward where the Fist of the Endless was. Looper turns the corner and runs smack dab into Anarchy 12, whom with his augmented strength from his suit halts Looper in place. Anarchy scans the Wardenary immediately, learns how to disable the Wardenary. An advanced piece of technology is teleported from Sector 12 and warped onto Anarchy's helmet. It then causes a supernova of ultra-radiant light designed to corrode the pupils and fry the entire eyeball. Anarchy burns the eyes out of Looper's head, then sends an ultra-kinetic wave of force strong enough to shatter the bones of a Wardenary, sending Looper collapsing to the ground disabled. Anarchy turns and looks at Marshall. We cut to Ivan standing in front of the Fist of the Endless, his eyes glowing in all of its shiny glory. He grabs it, then fades into the void. Anarchy 12 holds Looper's head in place, prepared to break it if he must, as he negotiates with Marshall Mesa. Anarchy reveals to Marshall that he has no intention of killing them, and that they and the entire Bulwark network can be pardoned for their crimes if they just tell him where the Fist of the Endless is. Marshall says nothing. He knows Looper wouldn't give it up like that. Ivan, Bakara, and Selena both appear from the void beside Anarchy. Ivan hands the Fist of the Endless to Anarchy, then sets his gaze back on Marshall Mesa for breaking his mask. Just ruined his whole debut of his new mask. Ivan points at him and tells Selena that he wants him dead. Selena looks at Marshall and tightens her tie while licking her lips. Anarchy stores the Fist in his suit and commands the peacekeepers to bring them to Sector 12 alive, but not necessarily in perfect condition. Anarchy prepares to depart when suddenly everything around them gets wavy and distorted. Anarchy activates his defenses. Selena and Ivan look around. Marshall's sense of self is so intact that he clearly sees it's an illusion. The instigator descends from a wormhole of green light that turns the entire night green with his radiance, his arm extended out as it transmutates into a magic tech rifle made of pure emerald, and it fires several pure beams of raw magic that penetrates the priest's shields, protecting Anarchy, and completely obliterates Anarchy's warsuit's barrier, thus blowing him out of the air, sending him crashing into a stack of freight containers, wounding him greatly. Suddenly, the undead body of the king, Raylagar Rhydon, possessed by the facilitator, appears from within his own illusion landscape and chops down on both Ivan and Selena, cutting them clearly in half with one strike, cutting across them horizontally. Selena and Ivan fall victim to the facilitator's illusion and believe they have just been severed in half, as the feeling felt 101% real. The facilitator king, with one punch, sends Selena flying across the ship and flying through the deck rails into the ocean. He then sends a powerful Raylagorian strong-style haymaker into Ivan, sending him flying into the opposite direction. Ivan reappears over top of the facilitator, glowing with Selena's enchanted protection, and impales the facilitator's collar with both razor-sharp knives and twists. The facilitator smiles and shoots green tendrils from out of his slit throat that wraps and binds Ivan's arms, holding him in place. He then begins to throw a storm of heavy haymakers at insane speeds, breaking Ivan's face into pieces. Ivan hawks and spits in the facilitator's face, but the facilitator opens his mouth and swallows it. The tendrils stretching from his neck then release a burst of shocking pain that was all in Ivan's head, until Selena grabs the facilitator from behind and with her abyssal strength digs into his 12-pack of abdominal muscles and rips open his stomach, causing Rhydon's intestines to spill out and drops Ivan. The facilitator goes to backhand Selena, but she captures his arm with her elongated jaws and slams him into the ground and through the deck of the ship into the floor below. The instigator walks toward Anarchy 12. He reminds him that he is the creator, and that Anarchy has overstepped his boundaries. Wasting no time, the instigator casts an array of magics that begin to alter all matter around the pile of debris Anarchy is buried in. All of the debris morphs into various substances and begin to form a tornado of ash, uncovering Anarchy, who we see damaged and holding his wound. The instigator, holding out his hands, asks Anarchy if he understands how easy it is to destroy one's own creation. Anarchy doesn't understand how something could have penetrated the priest's barriers, let alone his own. He realizes that the instigator has recovered to full health. The instigator engages him with a flawless blend of efficient magic and technology, and he unleashes his wrath upon Anarchy. He turns the ash into emerald and encases Anarchy in a mountain of it, but Anarchy cuts through it with waves of lasers that comb through any and all things in their wake, causing half of the ship to slowly sink. Large emerald constructs appear around Anarchy and begin to fire beams of magic, but Anarchy nullifies them with anti-magic fields. Anarchy's oracle informs him he needs to close the gap, and so his exosuit transforms, making him more agile, and programs itself with all of the martial arts it had learned from Archetype and Smart Marta, and Anarchy jets towards the instigator. The instigator opens the dimensional portal in front of Anarchy 12, causing him to appear directly in front of him, and proceeds to impale Anarchy with a Magitech sword. But Anarchy's suit warps the instigator's arm blade and forearm away from him, decapitating it clear off. Without hesitation, the instigator summons a new fiendish arm from the necrotic dimension and reaches into Anarchy's chest, attempting to pull his heart completely, bypassing his shields. Without hesitation, the instigator summons a new fiendish arm from the necrotic dimension and reaches into Anarchy's chest, attempting to pull his heart completely out, bypassing his shields entirely. Anarchy bends the instigator's arm using cybernetic strength and Raylagarian technique, and holds the instigator in place, as 12 robotic arms warp onto Anarchy's shoulder, all bearing advanced black market laser weaponry, and begin to chop, thrust, and slash at the instigator, who transmutes himself into a mysterious magical property impervious to the laser weapons, failing to slice through his form. Within seconds, Anarchy's oracle calculates a new strategy and warps onto Anarchy's suit 33 more arms holding even more advanced technology derived from the black market tech, and these blades sever right through the instigator's torso, injuring him brutally. The instigator stumbles back into a dimensional portal and reappears further away, with the entire side of Anarchy's body filled with a mass of 40+ arms spinning godlike weaponry. Anarchy 12 calmly walks lopsided toward an injured instigator, now with a grievous wound. Anarchy reminds his creator that the Uncown wanted him to focus on Anarchy the next cycle. Now why would that be? He asks the instigator, before sending a blade of spectral plasma plunging through his body. He lifts the instigator up and tells him because he is the superior and ultimate G-type, not your precious R-type X. Anarchy shows the instigator the synthetic Libra technology used to power the Oracle. I surpassed you even in that. We cut to Marshal Mesa evading the Peacekeepers while making his way over to Looper. He didn't know who these people were, but he damn sure was open to any help he could get. The Peacekeepers direct all their attention on Marshal and begin to engage him. Selena begins to smell the life force wafting in the air from the facilitator and instigator's broken vessels. Selena licks her lips and tastes the sweet, sweet Raylagarian candy coating of the Facilitator King. Once Ivan learns that the Facilitator King and the Instigator are simply spirits occupying vessels, the encounter becomes a totally different fight. The Facilitator leaps back up onto the deck. the magic interweavings of his vessel now exposed. The facilitator spots his brother impaled upon Anarchy's spectral plasma weapon and goes to leap over to him, but in mid-air, Ivan fades and reappears in between the instigator and the facilitator, pulls down his lower eyelid, snatching the facilitator's bodiless life essence right out of Raidan's vessel and sucked right into his milky pupilless eye. Raidan's carcass flops to the ground lifeless. Anarchy then allows Ivan to absorb the instigator's eternal, endless, and powerful soul into the eye as well, giving it no chance to return to its phylactery. The instigator's ancient body collapses to the deck. Anarchy 12, now in possession of the Fist, declares their mission a success. He has his peacekeepers collect the soulless bodies of the instigator and the facilitator and to haul them back to Sector 12 for study. Anarchy looks back at Marshall and Looper and tells them, Anarchy 12 looks back at Marshall and Looper and tells them he will leave them in the middle of the ocean as a show of mercy, but know this, if they return to Haven, they will be killed on sight. Anarchy holds up his hand as 2 nano swarm bots containing their DNA land and crawl into his wrist. Anarchy and the peacekeepers ascend into the air and fly back to Haven. Ivan and Selena look at each other, and Selena steps into the void. Ivan looks back at Marshall and tells him there's no antidote, and smiles a toothy grin before stepping into the void, vanishing. Marshall begins to cough up blood violently. Something was wrong, but he had no time to figure it out. The ship was sinking and he needed to get him and Looper onto a raft of some sort. Marshall manages to get he and Looper onto a large piece of wreckage, drifting in the ocean. Marshall looks down at his device, trying to call for assistance through the Bulwark network. But the screen glitches and displays a bunch of sabotaged messages appearing to be from allies, but are all insults and violent threats before finally displaying a blank screen with Anarchy's symbol on it. Marshall tosses the device into the sea. Looper gains consciousness, broken, blinded, and wounded. We tried. Marshall looks into the sunrise. When Marshall tapped into his hyperstate, he felt detached from reality. He felt a surge of optimism, as if something greater was on the horizon. He looks down at Looper and tells him not to give up. Makai, Vector, and the Panthro tribe stand in their ceremonial Makai, Vector, and the Panthro tribe stand in their ceremonial golden attire. Among them, we see Amanda V and the Venomous tribe arriving with her, all in their golden Nebi ceremonial attire as well. Any Nibunese man or woman who was capable of containing a chi beast within themselves had right to take the trial. A third challenger for the chi beast steps up as well. Nyla, a worthy and suitable Nebi warrior who we know is in cahoots with Amanda V, who we see shooting her a lustful and devious glare. But Nyla pretends she doesn't see it as to stay in character, while Vector watches her closely. She was the perfect spy. Vector's tactical intelligence detects that all of Amanda V's tribe appear to be amped up on a mysterious substance. He can tell by the blue veins in their eyes and the darkened tint of their fingernails. And Vector would be right. Amanda V had connections and was being backed by powerful people. All of the stops have been pulled out today. We see Maxima spectating with other foreign diplomats smiling and unworried by the outcome. Roderick O'Neill, aka the Dead Whisperer, comes carrying a bowl of ceremonial brew meant to be consumed as to bring them closer to the chi and tap into the ultimate life force. Roderick was substituting for the Nebi sage who suddenly fell ill. And because Roderick was the world's next best mediator and his apprentice, it was only right to have him concoct the brew. With all of this controversy around Makai's completely fabricated alleged crime, Amanda's supporters have convinced and enlisted Roderick's help. He secretly opposes Makai and has provided Amanda V with a special bone brew, evening the odds against the Beast King. Amanda and Roderick watch as Void Makai takes his sip of the ceremonial bowl. Then everyone else sips. The corrupted council members give a speech, and the trials begin. We cut to Void Makai climbing a massive floating mountain, racing to the top. Trailing behind him, we see Vector and the Pantho tribe climbing while fighting each other. Vector remains honorable and does not use his gravity manipulation, but instead relies on his combat prowess to face off against the super tribesmen hopped up on Bone Brew. Their agility, strength, and focus made each of them formidable opponents as Vector skillfully defeats and knocks them off of the floating mountains. Amanda V leaps over Vector, clearing him by yards, and grabs onto Makai, racing to the temples to the top of the mountain. Makai kicks her off, but she slithers up his body and bites him on the shoulder. Makai jams his elbow into her stomach, then charges his fist up with dark chi and clobbers her over the head, but she eats it and punches him back, knocking him loose a bit. Suddenly, a chi demon in complete manifestation of anyone who sipped the ceremonial brew comes leaping out of the nearby cavern and attacks. It bashes Amanda in the head, causing her to fall behind. It then attacks Makai, but is easily beat down. Makai, with great strength, dismantles the beast with one arm while holding his grip. He throws a powerful uppercut that throws the demon below him toward Amanda, who evades it and crawls her way back up. Makai reaches the temple and begins to progress through its trapped and puzzle-filled corridors of illusionary majestic paths. The temple became alive, and Makai felt the grasp of reality slipping away. Amanda V was not prepared for how mental this would be, and she begins to suffer because of it. Vector catches up, and he and Makai progress through the trials together, narrowly escaping death several times. Makai and Vector reach the altar of the wolf, sitting on the edge of the floating mountain. However, already awaiting, we see Nyla standing by it, waiting for Makai and Vector, approaching slowly. Amanda V catches up. All of her tribe have either gone mad or have been killed by the chi demons guarding the mountain. Amanda V laughs, circling around Makai. Just as suspected, Vector realizes Nyla has pledged her allegiance to Amanda V. Makai tells Amanda she can barely survive the trials. What makes her think she can handle him and his chi beast? Amanda tells him to shut his treacherous mouth, then accuses him of killing his own father, though she knows that that is a lie and it isn't true. Makai walks closer, then suddenly, Amanda does what was never done during the trials before. She pulls out a highly advanced and forbidden weapon called frag pipes and tells Makai the wolf is hers. A terrifying weapon, each pipe was fastened and rigged with highly advanced and dangerous Atlas Tech firepower. Amanda V gets ready to pull the triggers when suddenly Nyla leaps in front of Amanda and emits a bright, blinding light from her own eyes that burn Amanda's and blinds her with radiance. Amanda screams and drops the frag pipes as Nyla then kicks Amanda V off of the cliff, sending her plummeting out of the trials. Void Makai was not surprised by what had unfolded and knew of Nyla's mission. It was so secret that not even Vector knew. Makai salutes Nyla, and Vector escorts Makai to the wolf altar. Makai places his hand on the altar and opens his heart as the chi wolf spirit descends upon him and begins mauling him to death as Makai falls endlessly into the chi wolf's void like he knew he would. But this one felt different. Makai didn't feel any different. Hours later, we cut to Void Makai waking up before a raging and angry nation of Naboo. he passed out. A lot has happened since Makai's Chi-Wolf's slumber, and his body is being guarded by Vector and the Panthro tribe standing between the future leader and the venomous tribe. Even the council are rallying against Makai, as signs referencing the mass character assassination of Makai can be seen held in the air. Amanda V has convinced the nation with more fake evidence, this time video footage showing Makai in the act of murdering his father. The nation calls for his death, point blank period. Until Nyla steps forth and exposes Amanda V with all that she knows, revealing all of her plans in collusion with the criminals using recordings and conversations. To back her up, Shiro's clone steps in from the shadows and exposes Amanda's ploy to set up Makai with lies. Their testimonies were heavy blows to Amanda's plan. The nation grows quiet as they hear the recordings and see the tapes. Makai's name is getting cleared, but what happens next is a knockout punch. Maxima steps forth with her entourage of the yokai. Maxima snaps her fingers, and the yokai throw out onto the floor in front of Makai's feet a man with the bag over his head. Maxima pulls off the mask, the man behind all of the sabotage, Atlas Corp CEO Jeremiah Oliver. Everyone, including Tempest, was watching in awe. Maxima exposes Jeremiah Oliver betraying their secret alliance for the sake of Naboo's future king, Makai. She reveals to all of Naboo his plan to provide fabricated evidence and Atlas support of Amanda V's takeover. Using her mind manipulation, she had Jeremiah believing everything was going as planned, and that she was incredibly loyal to him. Even until now, his mind was in Maxima's mental fog. Jeremiah stands on his knees and looks around in shock of Maxima's betrayal. Amanda V looks taken back by Maxima's betrayal as well, and is prepared to be locked up, maybe even executed under Makai's rule. Maxima walks up to Makai, hands him the key to Jeremiah's cuffs, and tells him he owes her. Makai thanks her and considers her gesture. Vector knows she is a Dorinthian crime boss, but what she has done for Naboo was grand and unforgettable. Makai, now with a clear name, approaches Jeremiah looking down on him with complete disgust. Jeremiah begins to laugh out loud. Everyone looks in confusion. How could a man caught under these circumstances be laughing? Jeremiah looks at Maxima and tells her she is a fool for what she has done. Jeremiah tells them all to look at the faces of the people of Naboo. Do they look convinced? Makai and Maxima turn and notice that the people of Naboo do not look like they care about the evidence. The sky turns purple and the clouds get eerily dark. Jeremiah stands up to his feet as the Panthro tribesmen come and break Jeremiah's shackles with their swords. Makai and Vector look confused at the Panthro's tribe's betrayal. Jeremiah waves his hands as millions of black spiritual chains descend from the sky, attaching to every Naboo citizen's chi source and bind their hearts and minds to the mysterious force in the clouds. Makai and Vector charges Jeremiah, but they too are captured by the mysterious chains binding them in place, making them powerless as their chi is locked, suppressed, and frozen, unable to draw power from their life force. Jeremiah stands before all of the zombified nation, hypnotized by his influence, and he tells them of a dream that he has. A dream of how Amanda V is the sole leader of Naboo. The nation cheers and are completely wrapped around his finger and practically worshipping him and Amanda V like gods. The clouds in the sky part, revealing the ominous and sinister power in effect. A massive creature hovers over Naboo, casting a shadow over the floating cities. An inverted version of a chi beast, a toxic manifestation of Jeremiah's heart brought to life by the futurist. The Great Atlas Basilisk, a manifestation of Jeremiah Oliver's lust for power and control, circles the nation from above the clouds, its chains tethered to every Naboo man and woman's chi, thus suppressing the latent power within the Naboonese. Jeremiah has the corrupted council bring Amanda V her ruling ornaments, and she is crowned as the sole leader of Naboo. Jeremiah continues to orchestrate and convince Amanda to have Makai publicly executed and to have Vector, Nyla, and Maxima and everyone on their side jailed for life and left to rot. Makai, completely suppressed and weakened by the Atlas Basilisk, is brought to the front for the nation to see, and Jeremiah sits Serenity Funoichi in the front row. Amanda V retrieves a blade from the council, and then Amanda V is handed a blade from the council, and Amanda V is handed a blade from the council, and she wastes no time taking it to Makai's neck. With many tugs and pulls, Amanda V saws away at Makai's neck, killing him slowly and dishonorably in front of everyone. Amanda V holds his head up by its dreads as the hypnotized masses cheer with love of their new leader's gesture. Jeremiah shakes Amanda V's hand and congratulates her on her new position as Naboo leader. He then approaches Nyla and has his bodyguard confiscate her recording tapes by grabbing her hand and crushes the tapes along with her hand. The bodyguard's death touch withers her hand into nothing as she falls to her knees holding her wrist. Jeremiah then approaches Maxima and asks her if she would consider renegotiating deals over the Haven pipeline now that the dragons, bears, and Wangangers aren't around, as he extends his hand for a shake. Confused by the reference, Maxima looks into the charming bastard's face and spits, but the saliva is evaporated by intense heat generated by his bodyguard, who comes in and snatches her away, but Jeremiah calls him off. Instead, Jeremiah slaps Maxima across the head with an open hand, sending her crashing to the floor. For a few moments, she really likes Jeremiah, but this was just a side effect of his mutation. It instantly wears off, and Jeremiah has them all thrown into dungeons. We cut to Ninja Bello watching the footage of the trials from within her lab. She appears in shock and highly distraught at her king's head being waved around. A tear can be seen trickling down her face. Ninja looks up at the surveillance cameras and sees Naboo tribesmen coming to take her away. We watch as Ninja Bello rushes to finish her ultimate discovery before they come and take it and her away. The end of Ender's mutagen. Perfected and masterfully weaponized, Ninja pulls the canister out and stores it into her coat, then deletes any and all trace of the research from the lab as she escapes out the back. We see Tempest waiting for her on a small ship, and the two escape unnoticed. Makai's life force drifts back toward the void. He floats aimlessly, saddened by the fate of not only himself but his nation. Suddenly, he is immediately pulled away by an unknown force. What was this? He approaches an altar and beside it a large black chi dragon. the Chi Dragon introduces itself as the Dark Chi God Neocon and asks Makai if he wishes to return and take back what is his using Neocon's dark power. Hesitant and unfamiliar with such a Chi beast, he asks Neocon why he has never heard of him in the Chi beast mythos. Neocon replies that his power is only obtainable to those with the connection to the void. With the power of the Neocon Chi Dragon, you could return to life with my essence. A life force that cannot be manipulated by the Void Child. Makai thinks to himself, it's true. No matter what Chi beast he obtains, Chi in itself is a life force and thus susceptible to Ivan's control. Makai doesn't even consider it and refuses to wander from the path like he did before. Neocon the Chi Dragon is pleased with his decision and reveals itself as the Chi Wolf and commends Makai on the success of the final trial. In its gaping fangs, the Chi Wolf carries Makai's soul across the plains of life and drops him off at a mysterious burial site. Makai knows this location to be where the golden extraterrestrial ship crash-landed in Naboo. The same ship that was used to build the great floating cities of Naboo by his great ancestors. The wolf guides Makai to dig deep within the crash site, while giving Makai the true history of Naboo. Makai, digging, was symbolic of the truth he would soon discover. Makai digs up the remains of an extraterrestrial, the Mama Yaga, and is instructed by the wolf to consume its remains entirely. And so Makai does. Makai learns of Mama Yaga's origin, the battle of Yaga versus the Void Mother. After arriving to the continent that would soon become Naboo, Yaga remained hidden while creating life to offset the lack thereof. Before there was Naboo, there was the Abyss. Her mission was to replace nothing with a bit of something. Balance. The Abyss Mother could not stop Yaga's light, and so she sacrificed herself so she could produce life in order to gain leverage over Yaga. The Void Mother impregnated one of Yaga's living creations, a beautiful chocolate-scented Naboo woman, who then gave birth to the Abyssal child that would grow to become Ivan Bakara. As a being of the Abyss, Ivan inherited dominion over the Abyss, but it was the sacrifice of his mother that gave Ivan dominion over life force, allowing him to put pawns back into the realm of the living to serve his subtle purposes. Ivan placed Nebi men and women into powerful positions that were once there to protect Mama Yaga. They would soon slay her behind the curtains, staging it as a natural death, and broke her ship down, gaining wealth and advanced technology Nebi is known for today. This deed was done in secret, and Naboo history was rewritten. Till this day, Ivan's soul slaves contaminate Naboo royalty, even its council. The consumed spirit of Mama Yaga reveals to Makai that his entire family lineage are of a bloodline that serves the ancient abyssal adversary Ivan and the Void Mother, and that Naboo, though on the surface shimmers with Yaga, it is tainted with the abyss below. The wolf and Yaga are grateful that Makai has overcome the temptation of self and remained steadfast on his path. Mama Yaga grants him the Yaga spirit, the purest and rawest form of life force and opposite of that of the void. With this essence, Makai has all that he needs to purge Naboo of the void and rebalance the nothing and something. The wolf pours itself into Makai's heart along with the Yaga light. An entire decade has gone by in this mysterious limbo as Makai embraces and learns the way of the Chi Beast Wolf and the Yaga light. and is promised he will be able to return to Naboo to break the chains binding his people's life force, but cannot until Makai has watched many of his people suffer for straying from their path. Only then will the trial be complete, and Yaga Makai can return to reclaim his land. We see Tude standing before Dravko, Rez, and Nam. In his possession, he carries the Panic device and explains how with it, he will be able to tap into all of the shelved and unstable mutations within the metazone stored in the tank to transfer into Rezanok, thus completing Rezanok. Rez's eyes light up. Finally, the void within him could be filled. Dravko Maz rolls his eyes. All this science meta bullshit with the glowing red kid gave him a headache. He walks off and tends to his stolen gamma eggs. Makai hugs Rezanok and suggests that he gets rest before being hooked up to that Panic device. Rez kisses Nam on the forehead and bows to Tude and heads to bed to focus on growing his arm back. What a magnificent specimen, Tude says. Makai walks with Tude down a winding brick pathway and she agrees. She adds that he's an anomaly for sure. Tude tells Nam that he wasn't talking about Rezanok. Tude pokes her stomach and tells her that she is improved phenomenally. He tells her that she is the ultimate vessel and capable of harboring the greatest of elements. Nam, perplexed by his cryptic choice of words, assumes he's alluding to her emotions and takes it as a compliment. She's been working on that, though lately it's been a bit hard. Tude apologizes for not giving her all of the information that he knows, but explains that knowing too much could affect the outcome of his experiment. Nam is happy to know she's still part of some goddamn experiment. Tude tells her to get some rest. We cut to Nam and Rez sitting on the edge of the bed, naked. The multicolored moons, representing all of her inner emotions, shine bright over them. If what Tude says is true, these mutations will make you complete, possibly changing you again. Nam comes clean. She tells Rez that she doesn't trust Tude, like at all. He's a lich, and there's no ounce of love, care, or empathy in his body. Rezanok grabs her and tells her that if he tries anything, she has permission to kill him on the spot. Nam laughs. Rezanok compliments her naked body and observes it in all its glory. He then jokes that if it wasn't for her extracting all of his innocence into a card, he wouldn't be able to do. He then jokes that if it wasn't for her extracting all of his innocence into a card, he wouldn't have been able to do the things he's been doing to her in bed lately. Nam's eyes glow bright purple. Are you doing them to me or am I doing them to you? Rezanok, the nerd he is, actually tries to make sense of the question and looks for an answer. You know, the biological thing that she does in his mutation. She tells him to stop thinking about it and pushes him on his back. And the camera fades to black. A sharp tingling feeling shoots up Rez's brain, causing him to wake up from out of his sleep. He turns and sees Nam missing from his side. Rezanok can't help but feel like something is amiss. Rez searches the area and calls out to Nam but can't find her. He reaches the main quarters and spots a trail of acid and blood leading from Tude's chambers to behind the bar. Rezanok approaches and finds an unconscious Dravko Maz laying behind the bar with a bottle of vodka spilling out of his grip. Rezanok immediately runs into Tude's lab where he finds an unspeakable sight. We see an injured Tude partially covered in acid with a mask half eaten away. He's standing over Makai's surgically opened belly, laying upon an operation table. Within his hands, Tude holds a glowing life form early in its stages of development. Makai turns her head slowly, dazed and disoriented. It reaches out to Rez for help, but cannot say a word as her mind and body is numbed by the black chains holding her down and sapping her intelligence. Tude looks up at Rezanok while holding their glowing red child in his hands. Rezanok screams out to Nam and runs to her aid, holding her tight as Tude begins to turn and leave through a vortex. Rezanok begins to glow and mutate in a fit of rage. He can't even put words together and stands up and runs toward Tude. However, with one wave of his hand, Tude draws Nam's tarot card containing Rezanok's innocence and invokes the power within it, causing a terrible and godly being to manifest in front of Rezanok. Rezanok stumbles back as the entire area begins to crumble and quake. Manifesting before him is the embodiment of Rezanok's innocence in the form of a godlike entity from his favorite TV and comic, the Gamma Friends. We see Manowar rise to its feet, and in one swift movement, it rips a hole in time and space, causing a black hole to suck in everything existing in front of it. Rezanok crawls over to Makai and holds on to her for dear life as everything, including Dravko Maz, is pulled into the hole. Tude tells Rezanok he has served his purpose, and he and the Manowar step into Tude's meta gateway, vanishing with the glowing red life form in his arms, leaving everything behind. Rezanok whispers into Nam's ear, "I'm sorry," as a tear falls from his eyes. Nam places her hand on Rez's face as they spiral into nothingness.